Chapter 3490. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, the second head. However, Chu He's death was witnessed by 7 other higher-ups of the Tianji race, including Emperor Xiaofeng. If Yi Xian wanted to use Chu He's electronic consciousness, he had to shut the 7 of them up. This was the source of all evil Star region, so they couldn't send any information out. Yi Xian had plenty of chances to kill them one by one. When the time came, he wouldn't just obtain Chu He's electronic consciousness, but the other 7 as well. There was even the young patriarch Emperor Xiaofeng among them. With his identity, his authority in Tianji City was unimaginable. If Yi Xian could obtain his electronic consciousness, it would be extremely convenient for him to enter Tianji City. Thinking of this, Yi Xian immediately became excited. In his eyes, all the 8 higher-ups of the Tianji race in this fleet, including Emperor Xiaofeng, had become prey. Yi Xian was completely confident that he could kill them all. Then let's start with the second prey. Muttering to himself, Yi Xian's eyes swept across the holographic electronic screen in front of him, looking for the second target. Behind him, the commander of the Demon Royal Guards, Chanas, who had yet to recover from the shock of Chu He's death, trembled violently again. His face turned green as he stammered, Sha. Lord Sha, you're not thinking of killing them all, are you? Oh my god, Emperor Xiaofeng is the young patriarch of the Tianji race. This is the rhythm of breaking the heavens. If others find out, you're really done for. What? Are you planning to tell on me? Yi Xian glared at Chanas. The latter was so scared that his neck shrank back. With a bitter expression on his face, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was now in the same boat as Yi Xian. If he really told on him, he would probably be done for along with Yi Xian in the end. Since he was already on the pirate ship, he could only follow him to the end. Seeing Chanas shaking his head and smiling bitterly with a dejected expression, Yi Xian found it funny but didn't pay him any more attention. His eyes turned back to the holographic 3-dimensional screen in front of him. At the same time, in the surrounding void, the other 7 mechanical battlebugs led by Emperor Xiaofeng finally recovered from the shock of Chu He's death. They leaped up and charged at the mechanical battlebugs again, roaring crazily, resounding in this part of the void. Baofeng, you actually killed Chu He. Do you know how serious this is? The Tianji race's rules of the Demon Royal Guards allows us to compete, but not kill. You've violated the rules. In addition, you were disrespectful to the clan leader and humiliated the young clan leader many times. Now, we suspect that you are planning to betray the clan. Baofeng. That's right. There's no need for the clan leader to do anything. The 6 of us can assist the young clan leader in enforcing the clan's rules and kill you here. Boom Studios boom. Boom Studios boom. As the roars rang out, the surrounding void rumbled violently. 3 or 4 of the mechabugs even directly activated the ship's antimatter energy death ray cannons. 3 or 4 gigantic black antimatter energy light beams with a diameter of 2,000 meters shot out, intending to kill the mechabugs on the spot. What a joke. You speak as if you didn't attack me before. Yi Xian sneered. His words were full of disdain and sarcasm. But even so, didn't I still kill one of your battlebugs? Since you don't know what's good for you, then the next one will be the second one. Today, all of you will die here. I'm not in a hurry. Line up and I'll take care of you one by one. Xiao. As soon as he finished speaking, the mechanical battlebug suddenly jumped up. Its small body that was only 1,000 meters long was as agile as a butterfly. It passed through the 3 or 4 antimatter energy light beams and turned into a black stream of flowing arrow that tore through the void. In the blink of an eye, it was above another mechanical battlebug. Xiao. Chila. 2 rapid sounds of breaking through the air rang out. The mechanical devilbug's 2 arms instantly struck the mechanical battlebug's body, splitting open 2 cracks. For a moment, on the back of the mechanical battlebug, a burst of dazzling electric sparks immediately flickered. Just like that, 200-meter-long gashes appeared on its huge body. It looked incomparably ferocious. There were even familiar mournful cries that resounded through the void. At the same time, the other 6 mechanical battlebugs, including Emperor Xiaofeng, turned around and once again surrounded Yi Xian. After all, they had the advantage in numbers. No matter which one of the mechanical battlebugs Yi Xian chose as the target, the other 6 mechanical battlebugs would be able to immediately come to their aid. They definitely wouldn't give Yi Xian the chance to kill them in one fell swoop. The mechanical battle bug didn't continue to fight. Yi Xian's hearty laughter rang out from its body. With a jump, it turned into a black stream of flowing arrow that rapidly shot into the distance. It easily passed through the 6 mechanical battle bugs' blockade and rushed out of the encirclement. Facing all of this, Emperor Xiaofeng and the others' flustered and exasperated roars rang out once again. Accompanied by the mournful cries of the mechanical battle bug that had 2 large gashes on its back by Yi Xian, this large area of void was disturbed. Too passive. This brat's body is only 1,000 meters long. He's abnormally agile, and it just so happens that he's transformed from a small stronghold with a diameter of 50,000 meters. His kinetic energy isn't inferior to ours in the slightest, but his speed and agility far surpasses ours. It's simply too stifling. The key is that there are too many restrictions in the surrounding environment. There are large and small void cracks everywhere, and they are moving slowly. Our bodies are too big, so we have to be careful of these void cracks while we fight, but they are more agile. Under this situation, our advantage is infinitely weakened. We can't keep going like this. We really might be defeated by him. We have to use our full strength and kill this brat as soon as possible. Xiao! Chi la la! Without waiting for those fellows' angry roars to fall, the mechanical demon bug turned into a black stream of flowing arrow again. Ling Xiao broke through the blockade and arrived behind the injured mechanical battle bug again. The giant scorpion hammer at its back quickly swung out and smashed into the deathlight cannon at the mechanical battle bug's abdomen. The latter was shocked and wanted to retreat. It was also at this time that the pair of energy lights on the mechanical demon bug's back suddenly trembled. Ji Zhan was only 1,000 meters long, but it suddenly grew, reaching 2,000–3,000 meters in the blink of an eye. One of the lights suddenly became straight, turning into a giant half-transparent energy blade. Taking advantage of the other side dodging the scorpion hammer, it slashed down at its neck. Chapter 3491. Just as the second head was swallowed by the mechanical demon bug, a familiar system notification sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Congratulations, host, you have discovered an intelligent life form that can be devoured. Hong 2. Mechanical life form. Evolution level. Medium. Do you want to devour it immediately? This was the 3rd time he had been devoured and refined. Yi Xian did not hesitate and immediately gave an affirmative answer. Then, he turned into a black arrow and quickly fled, avoiding the attacks of Emperor Xiaofeng and the other mechanical demons. Rumble! Gotcha, gotcha! Almost at the same time, the body of the mechanical demon bug that had lost its head suddenly let out a loud roar. A large number of mechanical grinding sounds were heard, densely packed and deafening. In the blink of an eye, the body of the mechanical demon bug, which was originally only about 5,000 meters long, turned into a large oddly shaped irregular sphere with a diameter of 30 to 40,000 meters. Because this process was too sudden, and because Emperor Xiaofeng and the other mechanical demons rushed over in anger, the sudden expansion of the headless body of the mechanical demon bug almost injured one of the mechanical demons. In the end, the mechanical demon bug just barely dodged. At this time, the mechanical demon bug was already far away, and in Yi Xian's mind, the system notification that the refinement had been completed sounded again. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have successfully devoured an intelligent life form. You have obtained a mechanical intelligence core. After some investigation, Yi Xian found that there were 2 fist-sized semi-transparent crystals in his body. They were the mechanical intelligence cores of Chu He and Hong Tuesday. At this time, they had been refined by the devouring system, including the memory data of these 2 fellows, all stored in the database of the devouring system. Yi Xian could look at them at any time. As for the high-level identities of the Tianji clan that he could use, there were 3 of them. Sha Baofeng, Chu He, and Hong Tu. However, this was far from enough. Yi Xian's goal was to kill the other 6 mechanical battle insects, including Emperor Xiaofeng, one by one. At that time, with the addition of Sha Baofeng's mechanical intelligence core, he would have 9 high-ranking members of the Heavenly Fate clan that he could change at any time. With this level of authority, one would be able to move about unimpeded within Tianji City. Any operation could be completed quietly. There were still 6 prey left, and the task was difficult. Yi Xian was not happy about this, but became vigilant because he realized a problem. After Chu He and Hong Tu were killed one after another, the other 6 fellows were very likely to feel fear, and might even try to escape. Thoughts. As long as one of them managed to escape from the root of all evil star region, everything that Yi Xian had done would be exposed in an instant. He would never be able to return to Tianji City again. He would be walking right into a trap. This was something that Yi Xian would never allow to happen. Otherwise, all that he had done would be for naught. At this time, Emperor Xiao Feng and the others were crying out in anger again. Just as Yi Xian expected, although the 6 of them were angry, they were more shocked and shocked. Yi Xian had killed 2 mecha battle bugs in the short time it took to drink a cup of tea. Not only was he not injured at all, but he had also killed 2 mecha battle bugs. Moreover, he had done it with incomparable ease. Such a battle record and bloody reality made Emperor Xiao Feng and the others finally wake up. Their minds that had been clouded by anger had completely returned to normal. Damn it, Hong Tu also died in battle. Things don't seem to be right. It has already gotten out of our control. If this continues, we will definitely be killed one by the other. Did you notice? Every time he killed an opponent, the head of the mecha battle bug, where the electronic consciousness was, would be swallowed into the stomach of Sha Baofeng and the black demon bug that he had transformed into. What is he trying to do? There must be a reason. Otherwise, that Sha guy would not do such a boring thing. Could it be that his ultimate goal is the electronic consciousness in the heads of the 2 mecha battle bugs? It should be about right. This might be closely related to the sudden increase in his understanding of the mecha fusion ability. This guy has mastered some kind of forbidden technique that can devour the electronic consciousness of his own race and peek into the memories of our electronic life forms, including our various understandings. Yes, that must be it. This is an earth-shattering secret of great importance. Young clan leader, I suggest that we immediately end this exploration mission and evacuate at the same time. We must ensure that one of us can escape from the source of all evil and report this matter to the clan. Otherwise, Sha Baofeng will definitely become a malignant tumor. This kind of thing that can devour the electronic consciousness of his own race and turn it into his own is simply unheard of. This is simply too frightening and a great threat to our Tianji race. Evacuate immediately. This young patriarch orders that this exploration mission is temporarily cancelled due to the sudden change in circumstances. Everyone, cover me and help me evacuate. As these cries of alarm rang out, the 6 mechanical bugs all stopped their attacks, retreating instead of advancing, retreating back the way they came. They had already entered the depths of the outer region of the source of all evil, and in front of them was the buffer zone between the outer region and the inner region. Now that they were suddenly retreating, this gave Yi Xian a huge headache. No matter what, he could not allow these 6 fellows to escape, otherwise, there would be huge trouble. 6 mecha battle bugs, 1 in the front and 5 at the back. Young Emperor was at the front, and he could not possibly stay behind to cover the rear. He ordered the other 5 mecha battle bugs to cover him while he used extreme speed to escape towards the edge of the source of all evil. Yi Xian didn't hesitate any longer. The mechanical demon insect also moved at an extremely fast speed, transforming into a black arrow that streaked through the air. It didn't pay any attention to the 5 battle insects that were in charge of covering the rear. It tightly locked onto young Emperor Feng, who was running in the air in front of it, and quickly chased after him. At this moment, the advantage of the mecha battle bugs was vividly displayed. Of the 6 mecha battle bugs, 4 of them were transformed from small fortresses with a diameter of 50,000 meters. In terms of kinetic energy, they were completely inferior to the Starfield fortress. Although the outer appearance of the Starfield was only 50,000 meters, in reality, it was Yi Xian who limited its growth at that time, which was why it was controlled to such an extent. If it wasn't for that restriction order, even if the Starfield couldn't grow to the size of a 100,000-meter stronghold, it would at least be 70 to 80,000 meters long. As for the portion of the mecha battle bugs that could have been used to increase the size of the Starfield fortress, they were all used to strengthen the interior of the fortress. Chapter 3492. The kinetic energy of S.W. Starfield Life Fortress wasn't much weaker than a large fortress with a diameter of 100,000 meters to begin with. Even in the safety of the void, when it unleashed its maximum speed, it could still compete with these 6 mechanical bugs, 4 of them even being left behind by it. And now, in this abominable environment filled with void cracks like the root of all evil, the mechanical demon bugs had the advantage of nimble bodies. The 6 mechanical battle bugs, however, were simply unable to move at full speed due to their massive bodies. In the occasional burst of speed, they even met head-on. When they encountered void cracks, they had to slow down and avoid them. Under this situation, the advantage of the mechanical demon insect was not just a little bit. In just a few breaths, it had turned into a black arrow and passed by the 5 mechanical battle insects that were in charge of protecting it. Then, a few breaths passed, and even Emperor Xiaofeng, who had been running for his life in front, was left behind by Yi Xian. In the next instant, the mechanical demon bug's figure suddenly paused and stopped in the void. Then it turned around. The 4 antimatter energy death ray cannon barrels with a diameter of 100 meters all turned at the same time and aimed at the approaching young Emperor Xiaofeng and the mechanical demon bug that he had transformed into. Battle insect. Xiao. Xiao. An ear-piercing sound rang out. 4 black energy beams of antimatter death ray cannon shot out from the 4 barrels, all aimed at the mechanical battle insect that Emperor Xiaofeng had transformed into. The 4 antimatter death ray cannons of the Starfield Life Fortress were all 20,000 meters in diameter. At this moment, in the battle insect form under extreme condensation, the caliber of these 4 antimatter death ray cannons was also compressed to the extreme, only about 100 meters. The result of the diameter being compressed to the extreme was that the density of the death ray cannon's energy beam was greatly increased. Even though the ratio of the energy beam to the diameter was not proportional, its power was greatly increased, and its speed was even faster. In the blink of an eye, these 4 black death ray energy beams were already in front of them. At the same time, Emperor Xiaofeng's scream of fear suddenly sounded. Ah! Goddamn, how can it be so fast? There are actually 4 barrels. Since when can the shipboard death ray cannons fire in unison? This is exactly the same as young Master Linghu's Star Sky Black technology. The Tianji clan of the First Universe had also received news of the shocking battle that had taken place in the heavenly battle starfield of the Third Universe. Although they didn't know the details, they had a general grasp of the situation. At the very least, the shocking news of young Master Linghu having 4 20,000-meter death ray cannons was still within their grasp. After all, this was too subversive and did not conform to the current warship manufacturing technology. To put it bluntly, it was simply unscientific. The mechanical demon bug had shown 4 long tubes, but because it didn't fire the death ray cannon energy beam, Emperor Xiaofeng and the others didn't realize that the 4 tubes were actually 4 tubes of antimatter energy light cannon. Only now did young Emperor Xiaofeng come to his senses. Immediately after, an idea flashed through his mind. He seemed to have thought of something because of this, and let out a horrified scream. No, this is not right. In the news that came, young Master Linghu's mechanical demon bug also seemed to have 4 soft pipes like this. Heavens, this is not true. You. Sha Baofeng, you're actually colluding with the humans? You're in cahoots with young Master Linghu. It had to be said that this guy's mind was very flexible. He had realized the problem and almost guessed the truth after the mechanical demon bug had fired the antimatter death ray cannons. This one sentence was earth-shattering. Whether it was the Tianji clan higher-ups in the mechanical demon bug responsible for covering the rear, or the demon royal guard commander Chanaz next to Yi Xian, they were all stunned. The latter even turned to look at Yi Xian at this moment with a face full of shock. He trembled. Don't tell me you're thinking the same thing? You're a moron. Yi Xian didn't pay attention to this guy at all. He rolled his eyes and muttered, if this uncle was related to young Master Linghu, I would have dealt with them all already. Why would I wait until now? That guy has the Star Sky Black technology that even the Tianji clan doesn't have. Too fascinating. Sigh, it's a pity we have no fate to meet. In other words, if he had the chance to get acquainted with young Master Linghu, he really wanted to collude with him and betray the Tianji clan. Realizing this, Chanaz was so anxious that he wanted to cry on the spot. He had really boarded a pirate ship. Was he blind? Why did he choose to curry favor with this guy? Thinking about how he and the other party were grasshoppers on the same rope, Chanaz instantly felt like he was in a mess. His whole body felt unwell again. Whoosh! Rumble! A woo! The sound of boiling oil splashing water rang out. The huge explosion was accompanied by a large amount of sparks, followed by Di Xiaofeng's crazy howl. Out of the 4 antimatter death ray cannons, he had only dodged 3 of them. This was still very dangerous as he had almost touched a void crack not too far away. As for the last one that he hadn't dodged, it had pierced through the mechanical battlebug's tail. The characteristic of the antimatter energy beam was that it was indestructible. Everything that came into contact with it would be melted away. A large hole appeared on the mechanical battlebug's tail. Although it was only a meter in diameter, it had pierced through without any suspense. That kind of pain was simply unimaginable. At this moment, Di Xiaofeng's miserable howl was extremely mournful, far more so than before. This guy was truly frightened by the bombardment. Not only did his figure abruptly stop, he didn't even dare to move forward and quickly retreated. The 5 mechanical battle bugs that were originally behind him were also the same. The mechanical battle bugs were extremely fast and nimble. In this kind of environment, they could catch up to them at any time. At that time, the 4 antimatter death ray cannon's energy beams would be able to seal off all paths of retreat. Not all of them would hit, but it was guaranteed that 1 or 2 energy beams would hit the target. It was still possible. If this kind of situation happened several times in a row, they would clearly be killed on the spot. Instead of that, it would be better to retreat to the buffer zone of the root of all evil domain. After entering the buffer zone, although the environment there would be more dangerous, and some powerful star beasts would appear, this kind of danger would be the same for Sha Baofeng. Perhaps he would have an opportunity to take advantage of those star beasts. Kill them. Chapter 3493. The root of all evil starfield was incomparably vast. It was divided into the core region, the outer region, and the buffer zone between these 2 regions. The outer region only had countless void rifts of various sizes. And in the buffer zone, apart from the void rifts, there were also some extremely powerful space beasts that were extremely rare in the outer universe. As for the inner region, these space beasts were even more powerful, and there were also some unknown dangers. The 3 regions, each more dangerous than the other. But at this moment, with Emperor Xiaofeng in the lead, the 6 Tianji clan mechanical battle bugs chose to retreat to the middle region. In the outer region, they were restricted by the void rifts, but the small and nimble mechanical battle bugs didn't care at all, and could use all of their strength to deal with them. After entering the buffer zone, the danger they faced increased. Apart from the void rifts, there were also various astral beasts. However, the same was true for the mechanical demon bug. Under the suppression of the astral beasts, it couldn't fully focus on the battle against Emperor Xiaofeng and the others. At that time, the 6 of them would wait for an opportunity to make use of those space beasts to kill the mechanical battle bugs in one fell swoop. At least, compared to staying outside in the outer region where they couldn't do anything to the enemy at all, their chances were much higher. Regarding this point, Yi Xian was also well aware. Although he wasn't afraid and didn't take it to heart, Yi Xian could basically guess that the danger in the buffer zone ahead was definitely not something the outer region could compare to. And now, there were still 6 opponents. No matter what, before all of them entered, he had to think of a way to kill 1 or 2. That way, he would enter later with less pressure. Thinking of this, Yi Xian immediately issued an order to the life fortress of the wild star field, locking onto that 7,000-meter battle bug. Because it was the largest, its movements were extremely clumsy, and because it had to be constantly vigilant of the slow-moving void rifts, it was the best target to hunt. Xiao! 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 Different sonic booms sounded. The mechanical bug suddenly leapt up, its body turning into an undulating black arrow. With extreme speed and nimbleness, it avoided several dozen spatial cracks of varying sizes, arriving in front of this mechanical bug in the blink of an eye. At the same time, 4 black antimatter death ray energy beams with a diameter of meters arrived, locking onto 4 different parts of the mechanical battle bug's body. Combined with the void fissures around its body, it directly cut off any possibility of it escaping in any direction. The latter immediately noticed the situation. Realizing that it was in a dead end and that it was impossible for it to dodge, the war bug's body suddenly let out a crazy scream, full of fear. Baofeng Sha, what are you doing? Didn't they agree that whoever retreated would die? I haven't retreated at all. I'm clearly moving forward. You don't keep your word. Chi-la-la. A woo. Before he could finish his words, that strange sound like boiling oil splashing water already sounded, followed by an extremely mournful howl. Of the 4 energy beams, apart from 2 that were used to coordinate with the void fissures around its body to lock onto its body, preventing it from escaping in any direction, the other 2 energy beams that were aimed at its body all hit the target. Without any suspense, 2-meter diameter holes were left on this mechanical battle bug's body. One was on its back, the other was on its right shoulder. The black holes were extremely frightening. At the same time, the mechanical battle bug that had already arrived in front of it after a quick jump extended its pair of translucent energy wings that originally covered its entire body. One of them quickly straightened and extended, turning into a several 100-meter-long energy light blade. Aiming at this mechanical battle bug's neck, It viciously chopped down. Hiss! Crackle! After a clear tearing sound, accompanied by a large amount of electric sparks, its neck was directly cut off. The mechanical battlebug's huge head rolled off its body, and its body also instantly exploded. 70 to 80,000 meters in diameter, but the surface was jagged as if it had been gnawed by a dog, and there was simply no trace of it at all. It was impossible to tell that it was a huge iron and steel object that lay across the void. Within this 70 to 80,000 meter range, there were many void fissures of varying sizes. At this moment, this huge alloy object suddenly appeared, and was immediately cut into dozens of alloy lumps of different sizes by these void fissures. The entire void fissures was damaged to the point where it couldn't be damaged anymore, completely destroyed. Only the head of the mechanical battlebug that was about 300 meters away was undamaged, and it was currently rolling down towards the void. Xianxia immediately gave the order. The mechanical battlebug jumped at full speed, avoiding some of the void fissures, and caught up to it. Immediately after, the lower part of its abdomen wriggled again, and the originally 200-meter-wide mouth opened a little wider, barely swallowing the rolling mechanical head in one gulp. Congratulations, host. You have discovered a life form that can be devoured. Equal to heaven. Mechanical life form. Evolution level. Medium. Do you wish to devour it immediately? Just as the familiar system notification sounded in Yixian's mind, in 5 different directions, the frenzied roars of young emperor and the other 4 Tianji race higher-ups could be heard one after another. Ah! Sha Baofeng, you will definitely die this time. Once the patriarch finds out that you killed 3 people of the same race, he will definitely torture you for tens of thousands of years. Just you wait, we won't stop here. If you have the ability, follow us in. This buffer zone will be your burial ground. Don't run, you must follow us in. Otherwise, we will circle around and leave the buffer zone to enter the outer regions. Then, we will open the source of all evil and report everything you have done to the race. At that time, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. Come, you little bastard, you have no way out. Either you kill the 5 of us, or you can wash your neck and wait for death. Ah! Although their roars were filled with hatred and fury, the 5 of them did not dare to stay in the outer area for even a second. Their figures did not stop for even a moment as they charged directly into the buffer zone of the root of all evil region ahead of them with monstrous resentment. Yixian didn't chase after them, and instead stayed where he was. At the same time, he gave the system an order to immediately absorb and refine at full speed. A minute later, the second system notification sounded. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have successfully devoured a mechanical AI life form. You have obtained a mechanical AI core. Chapter 3494. Today, Yixian had a total of 4 mechanical intelligence cores. These 4 mechanical intelligence cores represented the lives of 4 Tianji race upper echelons. They were Sha Baofeng, Qi Tian, Chu He, and Hong Tu. Among them, Qi Tian, Chu He, and Hong Tu had just been killed by Yixian in the outer star domain of the root of all evil. After the electronic consciousness of these 3 fellows was refined by the devouring system within Yixian's body and condensed into a mechanical intelligence core, their mounts all collapsed and shattered into pieces. At this moment, they were still floating in the air around the outer region of the star system. 2 small fortresses with a diameter of 50,000 meters and 1 large fortress with a diameter of 100,000 meters. Although they had all been destroyed and could no longer be used, the components and internal space oscillators, kinetic energy cabins, and antimatter light energy generators were still there. These things were very difficult to obtain. Normally, Yixian wouldn't even be interested in them. With his personality, if he wanted to snatch something, he would snatch a fortress or fortress that was still in good condition. It wasn't like he couldn't obtain them. These broken things couldn't pique his interest at all. However, he had already prepared a giant antimatter void bomb and was still in the process of repairing it. He needed these important and powerful components and kinetic energy cabins. Therefore, Yixian couldn't just let go of the remains of these 3 fortresses. He had to keep them in his undying world and hand them over to the devouring system to strengthen the antimatter void bomb's power. Since this was a big gift prepared for the Tianji race's Tianji city, it was naturally better for it to be as powerful as possible. Furthermore, these 3 fortresses were the mounts of the 3 Tianji race upper echelons after all. There were still some treasures and cultivation resources inside. It was a bit too wasteful to just leave them here. With this thought in mind, Yi Xian immediately stepped out of the mechanical demon bug's abdomen after Emperor Xiaofeng and the other remaining 5 mechanical battle bugs entered the buffer zone of the root of all evil. He appeared in the outer void. If this scene was seen by Emperor Xiaofeng and the other Tianji race upper echelons, their eyes would probably pop out of their sockets and they would immediately guess Yi Xian's true identity. This was because the Tianji race's mechanical fusion ability couldn't allow them to appear independently with the mechanical battle bug. Once they appeared, the mechanical battle bug's form would immediately disappear and they would return to their original fortress or fortress form. Yi Xian being able to do this could only mean one thing. He wasn't using the Tianji race's mechanical fusion ability at all. This made it clear that he wasn't a member of the Tianji race. He was the young master Linghu, who had the same ability, or even the Star Black Technology race's young master Linghu. Unfortunately, young Emperor Xiaofeng and the rest of the Heaven's Legacy race's upper echelons couldn't see this scene. They had all retreated into the buffer zone and were isolated from this outer star field. Although the Demon Royal Guard Commander Chanas saw it clearly, he wasn't a member of the Heaven's Legacy race and couldn't understand the Heaven's Legacy race's mechanical fusion ability. Even if they saw it, they wouldn't be able to get any information from it. Yi Xian allowed the mechanical battle bug to stay in a temporarily safe spot in the outer void. Then, his figure turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the remains of the 3 strongholds. First, he entered the stronghold and began searching, keeping all the treasures and resources into his undying world. Then, he waved his hand and kept the useless remains of the stronghold, along with the kinetic energy cabin, void oscillator, antimatter light energy generator and other equipment, into his body. He threw them to the devouring system. He used them to increase the power of the giant antimatter void bomb. After searching all 3 strongholds, Yi Xian obtained quite a lot of treasures, rare minerals, and cultivation resources. Even for the current him, it could be said to be extremely impressive. After all, these 3 fellows were the upper echelons of Tianji race. Moreover, they were existences that could carry out the search together with young Patriarch Di Xiaofeng. Furthermore, they were the direct subordinates of Patriarch Di. Their wealth was naturally not ordinary. When the remains of the 3 strongholds were all stored into his body and handed over to the devouring system, the time for a meal had already passed. Yi Xian looked around and confirmed that there was nothing left in the outer void. Even if Tianji race sent a fleet to investigate, they definitely wouldn't be able to find anything. After not finding any clues, he nodded and turned around to enter the body of the mechanical battle bug hovering in the outer void. In the time it took to eat a meal, it was already enough for Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4 mechanical battle bugs to advance into a rather distant star field. However, Yi Xian wasn't in a hurry to immediately chase after them. During the battle just now, the devouring system in his body had absorbed and refined 3 times in a row, condensing a mechanical intelligence core that represented the existence of the upper echelons of Tianji race. Each time, a portion of the energy would be fed back to Yi Xian, greatly benefiting his physical body. During this process, he was also being nourished. However, because he was in battle, Yi Xian had been suppressing it. Now that he had some free time, he naturally needed to first digest this harvest before continuing the battle. Otherwise, he would definitely be unable to suppress the bottleneck during the battle and be forced to break through, which would be extremely disadvantageous for Yi Xian. The situation and rhythm of the battle were constantly changing. If there was even the slightest mistake, the opponent would be able to seize an opening and become a threat to Yi Xian. Sharpening the axe wouldn't delay the work of chopping firewood. It was the same for driving out the outside and pushing out the inside first. If he wanted to continue the battle, chase into the buffer zone of the source of all evil, and kill young Emperor Di and the other core members of the Tianji race one by one, Yi Xian had to first digest the harvest of the previous battle and break through. After all, those were the mechanical intelligence cores of the 3 powerful core members of the Tianji race, which contained their unique electronic consciousness. This was also a type of energy that was beneficial to Yi Xian's physical body, just like the mental power of the demon person's spiritual source core. Even though the mechanical intelligence cores were all controlled by the devouring system, even if only a small portion of the electronic consciousness was absorbed by Yi Xian's body, it was still possible for Yi Xian's body, which had been nourished, to break through 1 or 2 small levels in terms of the strength of his blood and qi. This was indeed the case. After returning to the internal space of the mechanical demon bug, Yi Xian opened up a secret room to cultivate in seclusion. In less than 2 hours, the familiar sound of a system notification rang out in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The physical body has leveled up. Current realm: Grotto Heaven Realm Level 8. Ding! Congratulations to the host for increasing the physical bodies realm. Current realm. Grotto Heaven Realm Level 9 Perfection. The 10th realm of the Grotto Heaven Realm was finally at Level 9 Perfection. After that, Xian only needed to break through one more small level to enter the 11th realm, the Mystic Light Realm. Chapter 3495. When Xian walked out of the secret room after more than 2 hours, the commander of the Demon Royal Guards, Chanas, was anxiously pacing around in the mechanical demon bug's abdomen cabin. Although this void area was temporarily safe, that was more than 2 hours ago. Right now, the slowly moving void around them. The void rifts were about to close in. If Xian still didn't come out, he could only think of a way to walk out of the mechanical demon bug's abdomen cabin. In fact, if it wasn't for this outer star field of the source of all evil, once he went out, even with his cultivation base, he would face danger after a long time. This was because in this kind of place, whether it was the spiritual sense of a human cultivator or the spiritual power of a demon cultivator, they couldn't extend too far and couldn't effectively predict in advance. The nearby void rifts were not as effective as electronic frequency signals without life fluctuations. Otherwise, he would have left long ago. The current Sha Baofeng was completely a big lunatic in his eyes. A big demon who was not afraid of anything. Chanas had long regretted boarding his pirate ship. Sha. Lord Sha, can we leave now? The deeper area of the source of all evil is said to be more dangerous. Let's not go in. Seeing Xian come out of the secret room, Chanas was immediately overjoyed. He rolled and crawled in front of Xian, begging him to leave. Are you stupid? Aren't you courting death if you leave now? If any one of those 5 guys go out, the 2 of us will die. Xian rolled his eyes. In the end, he patted his chest and said, I've never liked to implicate others. So, not to mention myself, even if it's for you, I must kill all 5 of them. Ugh. It's not like that. Xian's words made it seem as if the reason he chased after Emperor Xiao Feng's group of 5 was all for Chanas. The latter felt so wrong that he was on the verge of tears. His face drooped, but there was nothing he could do. Seeing that he didn't say anything more, Xian immediately ignored him and urged the mechanical demon bug to fly toward the buffer zone of the source of all evil. As soon as he rushed into this area, the light dimmed again. Even with Xian's current level of cultivation, he could only see a radius of 1,000 li at most. The spiritual sense of cultivators, the mental energy of the demon kin, and the electronic consciousness of the Heaven's legacy race were all restricted in this place. They were basically only visible to the naked eye, so they were of little help. Fortunately, the battleship's electronic frequency did not carry any signs of life. Although it was still limited here, it was not as great as the limitations of divine sense and other forms of energy. The mechanical bug's electronic frequency could roughly detect everything within a radius of 5,000 li, 5 times that of Xian's naked eye. It was enough to keep the mechanical demon bug moving at high speed. However, it was impossible to find traces of young Emperor and the others in a short period of time. However, Xian was not in a hurry. Since the other party had entered this place and was right in front of them, there was basically no way to escape. Previously, they had said that they would take a detour and leave the buffer zone from other directions. It was not feasible. In this buffer zone, void rifts still existed. Moreover, compared to the outer area of the root of all evil, it was more dangerous. On one hand, the visibility here was much worse. The battleship's electronic frequency could only cover a radius of 5,000 li, while the naked eye could only see a radius of 1,000 li. It was more difficult to predict in advance and avoid void rifts in time. In addition, the void rifts in this area were more concentrated. Although the movement speed was still very fast, compared to the outer area, it was obviously much faster. According to Xian's estimations, with the 5,000-meter-long body of the mechanical battle insect that Emperor Xiao Feng and the others had transformed into and its nimble performance, they wouldn't even be able to move at full speed in such an environment. Xian could basically guess the reason why they retreated into this area. They wanted to destroy Xian's carefree and unhurried nature in the outer area, so that Xian would more or less face some danger. Then, they could use this danger to make a move on Xian. But now, it seemed that these 5 fellows had clearly lifted a rock to smash their own feet. The mechanical bug under Xian's feet was indeed unable to move as freely in this area as it did in the outer area. But the restrictions were definitely not as severe as they had imagined. On the contrary, They themselves were already unable to move at full speed. Once Yi Xian found their traces, the most result would be to become Yi Xian's target. After confirming this situation, Yi Xian wasn't in a hurry. Although those 5 fellows had entered first and were more than 2 hours in advance, they probably wouldn't be able to go too far in this kind of environment. They would probably be able to catch up to them soon. Just like that, the mechanical bug maintained a uniform speed and advanced forward. At first, it did not encounter any other dangers, but after about 4 to 6 hours, it had basically entered the depths of the buffer zone. A new source of danger that belonged to this area finally arrived. Rustle. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Rustle, rustle. Lord Sha. Following a large number of strange noises that sounded like silkworms eating, Yi Xian did not have time to carefully investigate what had appeared in the surroundings. Chanas, who was behind him, had already scurried in front of him. His face was filled with incomparable nervousness as he nervously looked around. It was a complete display of fear of this little girl. Yi Xian was so angry that he almost kicked him out. This old fellow was simply a little paranoid. Now, he had only heard the sound, and it was only this kind of weak rustling sound that was not scary at all, and he had already made the atmosphere so terrifying. He really did not know what would happen if he really encountered something terrifying. What kind of reaction would he have? Scram to the side. This great master is about to be scared out of his wits by you. The key is that we have not even figured out what has appeared. Yi Xian was so angry that he directly scolded. Chanas, who was beside him, also seemed to feel that he had gone a little overboard. His face turned red, and he gave Yi Xian an embarrassed smile. This time, he behaved himself and quickly retreated to the side, not daring to make a sound. And these strange rustling sounds were clearly still thousands of miles away. Yi Xian used his naked eyes to look through the small observation windows around the abdomen to discover nothing at all. The surrounding was still an extremely dim and tattered space of the universe. Helpless, he could only issue a command to the mechanical bug to use the electronic frequency of the Starfield Life Fortress to probe, and then the results of the probe would be displayed on the holographic 3-dimensional screen in the abdomen. Chapter 3496. Insects. Densely packed insects. They were boundless, with no end in sight. At the very least, the electronic frequency detected by the mechanical insects showed that, other than the sparse inner circle, there were insects everywhere in the outer circle. Although there weren't so many that the entire void was filled to the point where there was no space for battleships to enter, the density was truly astonishing. Yi Xian could see from the holographic screen in front of him that there weren't many large empty spaces in the area where the insects were distributed. These insects were of different sizes. The small ones were hundreds of meters long, while the large ones were thousands of meters long. They were about the same size as the mechanical insects that young Emperor Xiaofeng and the other Tianji race higher-ups had merged with their flying fortresses and shrunk. Moreover, they were all beetles with hard shells, not soft-bodied reptiles. All of the insects were black, and their shells were covered with an oily luster. One look and one could tell that they were extremely hard. Their limbs and bodies were covered with sharp bobs and blades. They belonged to a type of beetle that was definitely very powerful in terms of combat prowess. In terms of aura, most of the black beetles were below the 8th realm, black hole realm, but a small number were above it. Yi Xian even saw a few black beetles at the 12th realm, void realm, on the holographic screen. Judging from their cultivation, they were even stronger than Yi Xian. This was the world of the insect race. Any human expert who came here, even if it was a universe realm expert at the 15th realm, had to be careful. This was because this was only the edge of the buffer zone. If they entered the inner circle, or even the depths of the entire source of all evil Starfield, there would definitely be even more terrifying black beetles. It was not necessarily impossible for a universe realm insect king or insect empress to appear. Fortunately, these black beetles didn't seem to be very violent and didn't seem to be very aggressive. They should be a type of insect race that was more inert. Otherwise, any living creature that entered this source of all evil would be the beginning of a nightmare. On the holographic screen, all the insects basically didn't move. Even if they moved, they would only wander around in a small area nearby. The dense and strange sound that made one's scalp tighten was the sound of their limbs crawling in the void and touching some space dust. Sound. There was no sound of eating or grinding of teeth, which meant that they did not have high requirements for food, which happened to fit the characteristics of this kind of lazy beetle. After confirming this, Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Under such circumstances, as long as they were careful and did not disturb the black beetles, It was entirely possible to pass through the territory occupied by the black beetles. No wonder they didn't see Emperor Xiaofeng and the others return. They must have passed through the corner of the Zerg territory shown on the holographic three-dimensional screen and rushed forward. It was definitely not their first time here, so they had some understanding of this place. Otherwise, they would have turned tail and fled long ago when they suddenly saw such a large group of terrifying universe bugs. When Yi Xian analyzed everything that he saw on the holographic screen, Chana's, who was behind him, basically had his own judgment. The originally green expression on his face eased a lot. Clearly, he had realized that this Zerg race was not as scary as they looked. Any lazy creature was like this. As long as they were not provoked, there would not be too much danger. Sha. Sir Sha, in this vast sea of bugs, it won't be so easy for us to find those few iron bugs. Maybe a female bug took a fancy to them and left them in the nest to be a guard. That's also possible. Seeing Yi Xian staring at the holographic three-dimensional screen in front of him and frowning without saying anything, the commander of the Demon Royal Guards, Chana's, seemed to feel that another opportunity had come. He moved closer and encouraged again. So, in my opinion, let's retreat first. Those 5 guys definitely won't be able to come out. If we also encounter a female bug with bad eyesight, it will be troublesome. It was truly difficult for him to think of such an excuse. Yi Xian rolled his eyes when he heard this. He wasn't interested in replying to him at all. After pondering for a moment, he immediately gave the order to the mechanical demon insect to continue forward. Whoosh! After receiving the order, the mechanical demon bug's body suddenly bounced, and in the blink of an eye, it was nearly 100 miles away, quickly moving into the depths of the buffer zone. At the same time, in the void thousands of miles ahead. This was already the depths of the buffer zone, and the surroundings were densely packed with bugs. There were basically not many gaps, but the 5,000-meter-long mechanical battle bug could still move forward. It was as if it was slowly moving in a crisscrossing winding path. In terms of speed, it was basically no longer possible. There was no need to think about it. It couldn't be fast even if it wanted to, unless it was the mechanical demon bug under Yi Xian. It was only about 1,000 meters in size, so it could more or less guarantee a certain speed. After all, the black beetles in the surrounding void were all more than 1,000 meters in size. With the agility of the mechanical demon bug, even if it was a winding path, it could quickly pass through it. At this moment, Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 5 higher-ups of the Tianji clan and the 5 mechanical battle bugs transformed from their respective fortresses were slowly moving forward in this void. Yi Xian's guess was correct. This wasn't the first time they had come to this source of all evil starfield. They had already entered and explored it 3 times, and this was their 4th time entering. The purpose of the first 3 times was to conduct a preliminary exploration, and at the same time, collect some samples to bring back to the Tianji clan's headquarters, Tianji City, and hand them over to the immortal rank superbrain in Tianji City for evaluation and analysis. In the end, the samples they brought out for the 3rd time finally had a definite evaluation result. Thus, they began their 4th exploration. This time, there were even more people coming in, a total of 8 higher-ups of the Tianji clan. Their purpose wasn't just to collect samples, but to take away the core hinterland with them. It was an important resource within the Tianji clan. In the first 3 explorations, the areas that the higher-ups of the Tianji clan had explored included not only the periphery of the starfield and the buffer zone of the central region, but even the core hinterland of the source of all evil starfield. They had basically explored more than 30 to 40% of the area. Therefore, although Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4 appeared to be very cautious, in fact, they were all very confident. In the previous 3 explorations, they had smoothly crossed this central region buffer zone. Although there were many black beetles here, as long as they didn't provoke them, they wouldn't attack. At present, they only needed to advance over 20,000 kilometers to leave the central region and enter the depths of the source of all evil. After entering that place, although the black beetles were more powerful, and some other rare ferocious starry sky beasts would appear, their numbers would be much fewer. Basically the black beetles. Chapter 3497. Wang. The void that was originally extremely quiet, with only a few faint rustling sounds, suddenly emitted a strange buzzing sound that continued without end. It was similar to the feeling after the space oscillator was activated. Slight ripples appeared in the void, causing people's scalps to tighten inexplicably, and a kind of feeling to arise in the bottom of their hearts. A bad feeling. The 5 mechanical bugs that were originally slowly moving forward immediately stopped and vigilantly looked around, but in the end, they discovered that the source of this strange buzzing sound was actually right in front of them, and it didn't seem to be near, as if it wasn't in the buffer zone of the central region, but deeper. The core region of the root of all evil. They had never encountered such a situation in the previous 3 times they entered this star region to explore. Basically, the 3 regions of the root of all evil seem to have a clear dividing line, the difference between them very obvious. In the outer region, there were countless void rifts of various sizes, but not a single black beetle. And in the central region's buffer zone, void rifts and black beetles coexisted, and there were especially many black beetles in this region, all of them existences below the 13th Great Realm Genesis realm. In the innermost region, the number of black beetles sharply decreased, but as long as one appeared, they would all be existences above the 13th Great Realm Genesis realm. Moreover, there would also be other types of space beasts, all of them above the Genesis realm. These powerful black beetles and space beasts would never come to the central region's buffer zone. But this time, there was a strange buzzing sound transmitted from the central region's core region to the central region's buffer zone. This matter was full of evil, causing Emperor Xiaofeng and the others to shiver inwardly, not daring to continue for a while. But now that they had already entered so deep, they only needed to advance a little more than 20,000 li to enter the core region of the root of all evil star region. At that time, they wouldn't be too far away from their target location. If they were to retreat now, they wouldn't be willing at all. Moreover, this was a new situation that hadn't appeared in the previous 3 times. If they didn't figure it out, what would they do if they encountered it again next time? Moreover, there was still a tiger blocking their path. They had no way to retreat at all. Under such circumstances, the 5 mechanical bugs immediately started communicating through electronic frequency, and quickly came to a unanimous decision. In any case, he had to first explore the source of this strange buzzing sound. If it was a false alarm, he would move forward again. If it really represented great danger, then he would look at the situation and make a decision. However, this buzzing sound was clearly coming from the depths of the root of all evil. It was at least 20,000 kilometers away, and the electronic frequency of a single mechanical battle bug could only detect a radius of 5,000 kilometers in such an environment. It was far from enough. The only way was for the 5 mechanical bugs to adjust the electronic waves they emitted to the same frequency band, forming a resonance, and then extend it out in a directional direction. This way, they could basically guarantee that they could detect the general situation in the directional area 30 to 40,000 kilometers away. This was the only way to deal with it. There was no other choice, so there was no need to hesitate. After Emperor Xiaofeng gave the order, the 5 mechanical bugs immediately activated the electronic frequency system on the ship. They adjusted to the same frequency band and successfully formed a resonance. They tied together and extended forward. Out. As this powerful and invisible electronic frequency smoothly extended forward, Emperor Xiaofeng and the other core members of the Heaven's Legacy race felt their hearts rise to their throats. They had not encountered such a strange situation in the previous 5 times. This time, they were in an unbearable situation, but it happened. This did not seem to be a good omen, giving them a slightly ominous feeling. But although they were worried, they weren't too worried. After all, the source of the buzzing sound was still 20,000 kilometers away. If the result of the detection was great danger, they could just immediately retreat. At the same time, in the depths of the root of all evil more than 20,000 kilometers away. After entering this area, the number of void rifts had decreased by more than half, and the densely packed black beetles had practically disappeared. Although the depths of the root of all evil were darker, it was also much quieter and colder. It was just that occasionally, 1 or 2 strange auras would pass by, but they were clearly extremely powerful. They were at least at the 13th Great Realm, the Genesis Realm, and even the 15th Great Realm, the Universe Realm, wasn't rare. At this moment, in a void about 4 to 5,000 miles ahead, there was a continuous but not very noisy buzzing sound coming from it. Along with the buzzing sound, a very powerful aura was vaguely mixed in it. Such an aura was definitely beyond the reach of the 15th Great Realm of the Universe Realm. It belonged to a Star Lord who had surpassed the Universe Realm. There was no telling if it was because it was worried that its aura would disturb something, but as the buzzing sound gradually faded away, the unique aura of a Star Lord became weaker and weaker. It was completely undetectable before it reached the edge of the depths of the root of all evil. This corner of the root of all evil used to have a lot of powerful auras active in the depths of the root of all evil, but at this moment, because of the buzzing sound mixed with the aura of a Star Lord, the powerful auras that were usually active were mostly gone. They didn't dare to show up again, partly because they were scared of the Star Lord who had caused the buzzing sound. Also, because they had lived in this place for a long time, they knew all the details of the weird buzzing sound that would only happen once every 100 years. The buzzing sound was exactly the signal of the Black Beetle Queen's mating. The Queen of the Black Beetles was a Star-Lord who had surpassed the universe realm. It was around 10,000 meters tall, but it was as lazy as all the other Black Beetles. Even when it came to mating, it only happened once every 100 years. Perhaps it was because it only happened once every 100 years that the Black Beetle Queen's requirements for the number of male black beetles would naturally be higher every time she went into heat. Moreover, the degree of torment was also quite tragic. Basically, not many of the male insects that were summoned by it survived. They were tormented to death. As time passed, the number of high-grade male black beetles in the depths of the root of all evil dwindled. Left with no other choice, the Black Beetle Mother Empress transmitted the mating frequency of the male black beetles to the buffer zone outside. However, the evolution of the black beetles in that area was relatively low. When they felt the aura of the Queen Mother, they were so scared that they froze on the spot. Almost none of them reacted. They didn't move at all, let alone respond with a biological frequency. This made the Black Armor Mother Empress very angry. Right now, it was in heat and was extremely restless. Chapter 3498. This signal was sent out by Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4 pairs of mechanical bugs. Either this was the will of the heavens, or the Demon Royal Guard Commander Chana's was the terrifying existence with poison on his mouth. He actually hit the nail on the head. In short, Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4 core higher-ups of the Qianxia race were really in big trouble this time. They had been targeted by a Star-Lord-level Black-Armored Mother Empress whose cultivation had surpassed the universe realm. It just so happened that the 5 of them were in the form of mechanical bugs. Even if they met the Black-Armored Mother Empress face to face, they wouldn't die immediately. Meanwhile, those 5 unlucky fellows were currently in a state of complete mechanical fusion with their respective mounts. Everything that happened to the mechanical bugs would be turned into feelings and consciousnesses, picked up by their electronic consciousnesses. To put it simply, it was empathizing with him. This was definitely the rhythm of someone dying. Even if they weren't humans but robots, they would still die from anger after being done to by a terrifying giant black beetle. Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4 were completely unaware of all this. Although the Black-Armored Mother Empress had already captured the signal sent out by the 5 of them, it was still a Star-Lord-level old monster whose cultivation had surpassed the universe realm. It had no problem at all blinding their senses. It was a piece of cake. In fact, what the Black-Armored Mother Empress was doing wasn't as simple as blinding their senses. Right now, it was in its estrus period and couldn't wait any longer. It could be said to be thirsty. After locking onto the signal sent out by Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4, the Black-Armored Mother Empress immediately sent out a clone and rushed towards the source of the signal. It was going to pick up tonight's bridegroom Xianxia and properly dote on him. In all these years, there were indeed very few who could respond so strongly to its signal. Meeting one today made the Black-Armored Mother Empress feel very comforted. Its clone was actually also a black beetle, but it was in the form of energy, condensed from the unique biological frequency of the Black-Armored Bug race. This energy clone of the Black-Armored Mother Empress wasn't small. It was at least 5,000 meters tall, which was much smaller than its original body. It was also much weaker, only at the universe state. For the Black-Armored Mother Empress whose original body was a Star-Lord, a universe state energy clone might not be a big deal, but it was fatal for Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4. If it was outside, the 5 mechanical armors might not fear a single universe realm energy black beetle. At the very least, they might have a chance. After all, young Emperor and the others were all existences in the 12th realm, the Void realm. They had fully merged with their mounts to become these terrifying mechanical battle insects. After that, even the universe state would have a headache when it came to fighting 5 against 1. However, the Black-Armored Mother Empress and the other 4 wouldn't dare resist in the face of a universe state insect king in such a situation. Their head. If he did not resist, he would at most be taken away by the other party. However, if he resisted, he would definitely die on the spot. Even if they were taken away, they would still be in great danger, but they would at least be able to live a little longer and think of a solution. Therefore, when the energy black beetle broke through the sea of insects and appeared in front of Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4, the 5 mechanical bugs were dumbfounded. They trembled slightly and didn't dare to make a sound, let alone turn around and run away or resist. What? The energy black beetle glanced at the 5 mechanical bugs with its huge eyes. It was a little surprised at first, But soon, two beams of red light shot out of its eyes, as if it was quite satisfied with the prey. Not only was it a new species, but there were also 5 of them. Judging from their bodies, they seemed to be tough enough. That would be enough to satisfy them. With that in mind, the energy black beetle immediately let out a shriek. A formless biological wave radiated outwards. A large number of black beetles in the surrounding void were originally trembling under the natural pressure of the black beetle queen. But at this moment, they changed their lazy nature and all of them began to crawl in the void. They gradually squeezed together, forcefully pushing Emperor Xiaofeng and the rest of the 5 heads. The mechanical bugs piled up above the sea of insects. Then, the sea of black beetles gradually began to wriggle like waves in the ocean, pushing the 5 mechanical bugs forward involuntarily. In the blink of an eye, they were already over 100 li away. Above the sea of insects, Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4 core members of the Heaven's Legacy race were already scared out of their wits. The 5 mechanical bugs were squeezed together, their bodies clearly trembling. At the same time, Emperor Xiaofeng and the other 4 were secretly communicating with each other through the signals of the bugs. Yang. Young clan leader. What is going on? Where did such a large universe black beetle come from? It actually moved the entire sea of insects to send us into the depths of the source of all evil. Could it be that it wants to hide us in its nest and pawn us as food? What the F***CK? This bunch of brainless fellows. I feel like we need to remind them that our materials can't be digested. Even if they chew and swallow, they will have diarrhea. That's wrong. This matter is very important. Old 6, since you brought it up, in my opinion, this glorious mission will be handed over to you, alright? Scram. Why am I the only one who came up with the idea and implementation? Are all of you dead? Stop arguing. This matter isn't as complicated as you think. Can't you see that this universe realm black beetle is only an energy form? It's clearly a clone. In the end, it was Emperor Xiaofeng who interrupted the other 4 Heaven's Legacy race upper echelons who were on the verge of rebelling. Then, he seemed to have sunk into some sort of thought, muttering to himself, even its clone is a universe realm black beetle king. From the looks of it, its main body must be at least a star level. An existence of a Star Lord level old monster. It's said that the black beetle race's bloodline source is an existence called the black beetle queen bug. It's very clear that this energy black beetle was sent by that Star-Lord level black beetle queen bug. But what is its goal? Queen bug? Queen bug? And that buzzing sound just now. As he muttered to this point, a thought suddenly flashed through young Emperor's mind. At this moment, he thought of a possibility, and then he screamed miserably. Ah! Damn it, I know what that strange buzzing sound is. That's clearly the biological frequency of the black beetle queen bug. This old monster is in heat. This is a mating signal. Chapter 3499. So, with a sonic boom, a black streak of light stopped in the middle of the void filled with cracks of various sizes. It was a mechanical demon bug that was about 1,000 meters long. It was the mechanical demon bug that the Starfield Life Fortress had transformed into. Yi Xian and the Demon Royal Guard Commander Chanas were in the middle of this mechanical demon bug. This dark void was located in the middle of the buffer zone of the root of all evil star region. It was only a little more than 2,000 li away from the location where Emperor Xiaofeng and the other core members of the Tianji clan had stopped and sent out a joint signal. Therefore, Yi Xian gave a new order to the mechanical demon bug to stop. This was because even with the naked eye, he could see that something was wrong with the void ahead. Ever since they entered this buffer zone, the surrounding void had always been densely packed with black beetles, practically as numerous as the hairs on an ox. Even with the mechanical devil bug's delicate body that was only 1,000 meters long, it almost couldn't maintain its full speed, because there really weren't many gaps in the void that could accommodate its feet. However, at this moment, Yi Xian looked around and saw that there were only large cracks in the void. He couldn't see any black beetles at all. This was truly too strange. However, because he was in this buffer zone, his naked eye's visual range was only about 1,000 li. This area was clearly the same. After Yi Xian stopped, he thought for a moment before carefully controlling the mechanical demon bug to secretly extend the battleship's biological frequency. As the Starfield Life Fortress, its biological frequency was different from other battleships. It had a higher degree of autonomy and control. Therefore, if it was necessary, the extended biological frequency could achieve greater concealment. This was just Yi Xian's habitual cautiousness. However, He quickly discovered that this cautiousness had inadvertently saved him from a very big problem. This was because in the image captured by the biological frequency of the Starfield Life Fortress, he saw a shocking scene. In such an environment, the biological frequency of the Starfield Life Stronghold could only cover a radius of 5,000 kilometers. In the void about 4,000 kilometers in front of them, Xianxia once again saw a large number of black beetles. They were densely packed, and the degree was even greater than before. They were packed into a sea of insects. However, what shocked him wasn't this sea of black beetles, but the existences that were rolling in the black waves formed by the sea of black beetles. 5 mechanical battle insects. These were clearly the 5 fellows from the young Emperor Peak. However, their encounters and current situation were truly speechless. Not only did Xianxia open his mouth wide, but the Demon Royal Guard's commander, Chanaz, also had a dumbstruck expression on his face. The 5 mechanical bugs were currently struggling in the sea of black beetles, tossing and turning, shrieking and making a scene. The scene was chaotic to the extreme, and it was even more tragic to the extreme. Young Emperor Feng's group of 5 were after all the core upper echelons of the Tianji race. Their cultivation base had already reached the late stage of the 12th Great Realm, the Void Realm. Furthermore, they had undergone a complete mechanical fusion with their respective fortresses, turning into 5,000-meter-long mechanical battle insects. This caused their overall combat strength to increase rapidly. Qi Shang was basically on par with the 13th Great Realm, the Genesis Realm. All 5 mechanical battle insects were like this. If not for Xianxia's life fortress, he wouldn't have been able to fight against them without using some powerful abilities and techniques. Although the black beetles in this buffer zone were extremely powerful, they were basically only at the black hole realm. The strongest was only at the 13th Great Realm, the Genesis Realm. Hence, at this moment, when the 5 mechanical battle bugs were unleashed, the tip of the wave of the black bug sea was instantly filled with blood. Mantis knives and spiked hammers were swung around, and from time to time, one could see a black beetle being split open or blown apart. It was obvious that the 5 of them had been forced into a corner. At that moment, they were being carried by the sea of black beetles. As they were being dragged forward by the waves, they kept swinging their mantis sabers and spikes. They had even activated the antimatter death ray cannon. From time to time, a black antimatter energy beam could be seen shooting out from the 5 mechanical battle insects' abdomens. At this moment, a 2,000-meter-wide hole would appear in the black beetle sea below. That was a sign that a large number of black beetles were instantly killed by the antimatter death ray cannons. It was as if a large portion of seawater had suddenly disappeared from the boundless black ocean. Unfortunately, this black sea was simply too vast. It stretched for tens of thousands of miles, and the waves were extremely turbulent. A mere 2,000-meter-wide hole was completely meaningless. A single wave was enough to fill up the hole, continuing to carry the 5 mechanical battle insects rolling on top of the waves. They were rapidly moving forward into the unknown void in front of them. This scene made Xianxia and Chanaz's hair stand on end. Those 5 fellows were clearly giving it their all. The antimatter death ray cannons that they fired from time to time was proof. They were clearly waiting for the antimatter death ray cannons to be fully charged before activating the death ray cannons. Then, it would be a cooldown. Once the cooldown was over, they would immediately fire a second shot. Even so, it didn't change anything. They were already moving further and further away from the terrifying Black Sea. Heavens, what did those 5 fellows do? How did they provoke such anger and resentment? Xianxia's face was full of shock. He controlled the mechanical battle insects to carefully follow behind from afar while muttering to himself, "These black beetles are clearly inert creatures. As long as you don't provoke them, you won't be attacked even if you walk past them. But they... Sha. Sir Sha, this place is getting more and more strange. Let's go back." Behind them, Chanaz's voice sounded again. He raised his hand and pointed at the end of the holographic 3-dimensional screen in front of him. With a drooping face he pleaded, "Look, this nest of bugs clearly has a leader. The aura of the one at the front. Oh my god, that's the 15th realm, Qianquan. Almighty. It must be a female that has taken a liking to these 5 big bugs. It doesn't seem too safe for us to follow behind them. What if the female bug takes a liking to us too? Wouldn't we be caught and brought to their nest? We won't have to do anything in the future. We'll just wait to be pampered by the female bug and help her give birth to little bugs all day long." Female bug? Xianxia was stunned. His expression suddenly became strange. He ignored Chana's and immediately started searching in the database of the devouring system in his body. As for the search criteria, it was naturally the female bug of the black beetles. Soon, the relevant information was found and appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Chapter 3500. I want to go back. Sha. Lord Sha, let me out. I won't go any further. It's too scary. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the commander of the demon royal guards, Chana's, was so scared that his face turned green again. This time, he seemed to have made up his mind. He actually asked Yi Xian to let him leave the mechanical demon bug, but this guy refused to go any further. Are you sure? Yi Xian was speechless as well. He turned his head to look at Chana's and pointed at the path behind him. Right now, we are in the buffer zone of the source of all evil. From here to the edge of the outer region, there is no spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the void. You still have to use your divine sense to explore the path. Yao, are you sure you can leave the root of all evil before you run out of energy? Plop. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Chana's was instantly stunned. He sat on the floor of the abdomen and stared blankly. In front of them, the turbulent black sea of insects was gradually moving further away. Yi Xian did not bother with Chana's anymore. He immediately urged the mechanical demon bug to increase its speed slightly. He maintained a distance of 10,000 miles behind and quickly caught up again. Not long after, they reached the end of the buffer zone of the root of all evil. In the void in front of them, there was a light and dark dividing line. This was the buffer zone of the root of all evil, and on the other side of the dividing line was an even darker world. That was the core hinterland of the root of all evil. The black sea of insects in front of them quickly crossed the dividing line and entered the core hinterland. The void 10,000 miles in front of them was instantly empty and looked deserted. Yi Xian increased his speed again and caught up. He crossed the dividing line without hesitation, and finally entered the core hinterland of the root of all evil. However, the expected system notification did not appear. Usually, if the target of the system exploration mission was within a certain range, the system would immediately send out a notification if it could sense it. However, there was no notification now. It could only mean that the target was not in this corner of the galaxy. Yi Xian still had to look around. In front of him, the surging sea of black insects was still moving. After arriving here, the buzzing in the air grew louder, faintly bringing with it a sense of impatience, as if it could not wait any longer. This word flashed through the minds of Yi Xian and Chana's, causing them to subconsciously turn their heads and exchange glances. Then, they shuddered in unison. This queen insect is a star lord that's stronger than the universe grand cultivators? At the same time, Yi Xian possessed the divine sense of a human cultivator, the mental strength of a devil cultivator expert, and the electronic consciousness of a mechanical intelligent life form. His perception was extremely sharp, and before Chana's could catch anything from these buzzing sounds, he had already sensed a trace of the obscure aura of a star lord. Muttering to himself, Yi Xian no longer hesitated. He immediately urged the mechanical insect to fly in another direction. What a joke! This was a star lord in heat. That thing did not even let go of a mechanical insect with an alloy body. Whether it wanted to have a taste or was really thirsty to a certain extent, there was one thing that was certain. If Yi Xian stayed here, once he was discovered, he would definitely be discovered. If he stayed here, he would definitely suffer. Although the mechanical insect was much smaller in size, perhaps in the eyes of the Star Lord, it was the short and cute type. That would definitely be fatal. Anyway, Emperor Xiaofeng and the other four had no way to survive this time. Even if they did not die to the Star Lord Black Beetle Queen, they would definitely be imprisoned and slowly played with. Escaping was a joke. Therefore, there was no need for Yi Xian to keep an eye on them. Since they could not escape, then there was no need to worry about their lives. They were now the companions of the Star Lord Black Beetle Queen. Scheming against them was too dangerous and not worth it. Seeing that Yi Xian was no longer crazy this time and was staying away from the corner of the starfield where the Star Lord Black Beetle Queen was, the Demon Guard Commander Chana's raised his hand to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead. His entire body seemed to have been drained, and he once again sat down on the floor of the abdomen cabin. Thinking back on their experience, everything was normal before they entered the source of all evil starfield. However, after entering this starfield, Lord Sha seemed to have been bewitched. He was a completely different person. This was simply a sin. It really is the source of all evil. If I can get out of this damned place alive, I will never come back again. Sitting alone on the floor of the abdomen cabin, Chana's mumbled to himself. This time, he was really scared out of his wits. A Star-Lord Black Beetle Queen that did not even let go of a mechanical battle bug was definitely a nightmarish existence. Very soon, the mechanical demon bug left the corner of the starfield where the Black Beetle Queen was. Gradually, the buzzing sound of the Black Beetle Queen's courtship became weaker and weaker until it completely disappeared in the end. However, everything did not calm down just like that. Previously, in the area where the buzzing sound was raging, apart from the Black Beetle Queen, there were no other types of star beasts in the void. They had probably all been scared away. If they were captured by a Star-Lord Black Beetle Queen and forced to do it, it would definitely be a terrifying thing even for star beasts. However, now that the buzzing sound of the Black Beetle Queen's courtship could no longer be heard, the figures of other types of star beasts gradually appeared in the void. At first, there was only one or two, but soon, as the mechanical demon bug went deeper, the number of star beasts in the void also increased. Judging from their auras, they were all above the 13th realm, the Genesis state. Yi Xian did not dare to act rashly. After all, this was the core hinterland of the root of all evil. He controlled the mechanical demon bug and carefully avoided these star beasts. He also activated a concealment array to conceal the mechanical demon bug's aura as much as possible so that he would not be exposed. Not long after, 1,000 feet long sub-blood dragon appeared in the void ahead. The aura around it had actually reached the 15th realm, the late-stage universe state. It was extremely powerful. Yi Xian was almost drooling at the sight. He even muttered to himself, "Tesketeske, a late-stage universe state sub-blood dragon. If I could get my hands on that dragon liver and braise it, how delicious would it be?" Ha! There's actually a universe state glazed fire phoenix in the distance? Whoosh, what is this place? Are there as many universe state experts as dogs? Or is this the back garden of some god raising all kinds of delicacies? Why are there all kinds of top-notch ingredients? I can barely move my feet from looking at them. Plop! Before he could finish speaking, the commander of the demon royal guards behind him fell to the ground once again. This fellow was scared out of his wits. He stared blankly at Yi Xian with a face full of astonishment. Chapter 35:01. Half a day passed in the blink of an eye. The source of all evil was a vast space zone. It would take more than a month to reach its end. Therefore, even though Yi Xian was getting impatient, the system notification that he had been waiting for didn't appear. Along the way, they had seen too many ferocious beasts of various shapes and sizes, but all of them had extremely powerful auras. At first, Yi Xian would occasionally tease him, but in the end, even he was a little scared. He shut his mouth and carefully controlled the mechanical demon insect to slowly move forward. He didn't dare to say anything else. It was because the ferocious beasts they saw in the void were getting stronger and stronger as time went by. It wasn't surprising that there were so many of them. The truth was that Star-Lords were everywhere. For example, at this moment, there was clearly a space ferocious beast that looked somewhat similar to a Qilin in the distant void on the right side. However, it was completely green. Its body was not very big, only about 10,000 feet. It was one size smaller than an ordinary space ferocious beast. It was lying in the void, sleeping. However, he was clearly a Star-Lord. Compared to the black-armored Mother Empress from before, it was much stronger. After traveling for a short distance, a humanoid mutated beast appeared in the void to his left. It was 10,000 feet tall, and its entire body was covered with mouths. It didn't mean that it had many heads, as it only had one head. Those mouths were directly clones on its limbs and torso. It was also swallowing and eating non-stop. As for its food, it was mostly small ferocious beasts in the Genesis state, including the black beetle. This many-mouthed beast was definitely extremely ferocious, because there were no other ferocious beasts in the surroundings of the void where it was hibernating. The only ferocious beasts that were present were the ones being chewed and swallowed by the countless mouths all over its body. Yi Xian even saw an ancient devil ape, which seemed to have a strong bloodline from the primordial era. It was close to atavism. That ancient devil ape had 3 heads and 6 arms. It even had 3 torsos. It was thousands of meters tall and was close to the peak of the Star-Lord state. It was even stronger than the many-mouthed beast and the black shell mother. This was not the most important thing. What was even more frightening was that the 3 bodies of the ancient ape demons were completely different. One of them was a body of flesh and blood, completely black. Its fur flickered with faint radiance, looking incomparably tough. The second was the body of the skeleton. Its entire body was grayish gold, and it emitted a metallic texture, giving off an incomparably cold feeling. The third was an illusory body of black fog. Its aura was ethereal, as if it did not exist at all. It was completely a black fog. Only its two eyes shot out two terrifying blazing red lights. The ancient ape demon was the most powerful creature Yi Xian had seen since he entered the star domain, the source of all evil. It could even be said that it was the most powerful creature Yi Xian had ever seen. Of course, the primordial paragons he had seen in the images of the primordial divine abilities such as the heaven-falling bow did not count, including the headless infant corpse. He did not dare to approach such a creature at all. While he was still thousands of miles away, he hurriedly controlled the mechanical demon bug to change direction and flee far away. The mechanical demon bug's frequency signal could only detect a distance of about 3,000 miles in the core hinterland of the origin of all evil, while Yi Xian's consciousness could only detect a distance of 700 to 800 miles. The reason why he could still sense the aura of the primordial demon ape from thousands of miles away, including the many-mouthed beast and the other existences, was because these existences were simply too powerful. Even the obscure void at the core of the root of all evil couldn't conceal or obstruct their auras. If it were not so, the mechanical demon bug would not even have a chance to struggle in the face of such a creature. It would most likely end up tragically on the spot. Gradually, after changing directions, as the mechanical demon bugs moved further and further away, the ancient ape demons with the terrifying aura finally disappeared from sight. However, on the left and right sides of the void in front of them, other ferocious space beasts appeared. Indeed, there were as many Star Lords as there were dogs. Xianxia was already scared out of his wits. Even Yi Xian's heart had sunk to the bottom of the valley, and he did not speak for a long time. This star zone, the source of all evil, was too weird. Whether it was the periphery, the buffer zone of the central domain, or the current core, they were all full of space cracks of various sizes. It was as if this vast star zone was simply a ragged bag that had been cut countless times with knives. However, it did not collapse. After entering this place, as long as one was not touched by those void cracks, one would be fine. That was not the problem. The key was the ferocious space beasts in this star field. The black beetles in the buffer zone of the central domain were still acceptable. After all, even in the normal universe, such a zone was not boring. It was occupied by a certain species, and a large number of creatures of that species lived there. However, this core hinterland was too strange and did not conform to common sense. If it was only a large number of space beasts of the same species, it would not be a big deal. However, in this core hinterland, although the density of space beasts was not very high, there were various kinds of space beasts. Yi Xian had seen at least hundreds of different space beasts in just 1.5 days' time. Moreover, their strength was above the 13th realm, the Genesis realm, and there were many grand cultivators and star lords. It was said that 2 tigers could not live on one mountain. In the context of the universe, this sentence was also applicable. It was basically impossible to find a situation like this core hinterland of the origin of all evil in all 3 dimensions of the universe. A large number of ferocious beasts of different species and races lived there. It was simply a miracle. A miracle that was full of thick and strange aura. In such a dangerous environment, it was simply too difficult to complete the system title exploration mission. It should be known that the time limit of the system title exploration mission was only 1 month. Now, 2 days had passed. Although Yi Xian had entered the core hinterland of the origin of all evil starfield, he had not found any other clues. He did not even know what the objective of the mission, which was the so-called origin of all evil, was. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days had passed. Calculating the time, a full 5 days had passed for the system title exploration mission. There were only 25 days left, but Yi Xian still had not found anything. Once the time limit was up, if there was still no result, the system would automatically judge that the exploration mission had failed. He could not help but feel a little anxious. It was also at this time that in the dark void ahead, a scene that was not quite the same as before finally appeared. When it came into view, Yi Xian immediately opened his mouth wide, his face filled with shock. Chapter 3502. The reason why everything in the void ahead was only slightly different from what Yi Xian had seen along the way, but not completely different, was because there was also a large number of ferocious star beasts in the void ahead. This was the same as what he had seen along the way. The only difference was that these ferocious star beasts were all dead. Their bodies were so huge that they had manifested their bloodline true bodies. They were lying in the dark void ahead, and most of them were incomplete. Yi Xian even saw an ancient demon ape. Its aura was even more powerful than the one he had seen along the way. Its bloodline true body was hundreds of thousands of feet tall, but it was lying in the void at this moment. Among the 3 different ape bodies, the black body of flesh and blood had lost its head. More than half of its body was incomplete, but golden ape blood still flowed from it. It exuded a strong ancient aura. Among the other 2 bodies, the skeletal body was almost completely shattered. Only the head still hung on the shoulder. As for the black mist-like illusory body, it had already dissipated. In addition, there was a silver dragon in the distance. Only the back half of its body was left. The front half, including the dragon head, was all gone. Further away, there was even a huge true phoenix. Although it had also fallen, its body was still steaming with phoenix flames. It also exuded a strong ancient aura. There were too many incomplete corpses like this. Any one of them was a terrifying existence that surpassed the Star-Lord level. Yi Xian didn't dare and couldn't get close. He tried to approach a many-armed monster. Just as he was about 10,000 miles away from it, the mechanical demon bug's huge body began to tremble. Even the world bug started to evolve. The countless micromolecules in its body resisted and didn't want to get close. Yi Xian had an epiphany. If he got too close, the mechanical demon bug would disintegrate, and he and Channas, who were hiding in its abdomen, might be seriously injured or even killed. These creatures were too powerful. No one knew how long they had fallen here, but the aura emitted from their incomplete bodies was so strong that even Yi Xian could only wander 10,000 miles away. If he got any closer, he would encounter misfortune. What shocked Yi Xian the most was that the remains of these powerful creatures all emitted a strong ancient aura. When he got here, even the void was filled with the same aura as that of the weird cage in the Forbidden Valley of the Demon Emperor planet. The only difference was that the cage in the void was from the ancient times. It was suspected that a corner of the void of the ancient times was cut off and turned into a cage. As for this place, it belonged to the current world. However, countless years ago, someone tore through the void and placed the remains of a large number of powerful beings from the primordial era here. The dense primordial aura emitted by these remains gave Yi Xian an illusion. He almost thought that he had run into another cage like the one in the Forbidden Valley of the Devil Emperor planet. Who is it? How could they be so generous? They are no weaker than the ancient cage connected to the Forbidden Valley of the Demon Emperor planet. These incomplete bodies are extremely powerful. They are from the ancient times. Although they are not the supreme beings of the ancient times like the Golden Divine Dragon, and they are even weaker than the supreme beings of the ancient times like the Void Ladle Master and the Bloodthirsty Lion. But they are creatures from the ancient times after all. Did they also fall in that great battle? They were thrown here. What is their purpose? And which camp did they belong to? Besides, those supreme beings of the universe and even the old monsters of the Star-Lord level, including the Black-Armored Queen, are they all descendants of these ancient creatures? Is it because of this reason that a large number of powerful ferocious beasts of different races have gathered in the outer regions and are unwilling to leave because the remains of their bloodline ancestor are in the depths of the origin of all evil? These words were like sleep talk. As Yi Xian murmured, they burst out from his mouth and reached the ears of Channas, the commander of the Demon Emperor guards behind him. Finally, Channas couldn't bear the shock in his heart. He rolled his eyes and passed out directly. Yi Xian's heart sank to the bottom. He was more and more unsure about the title exploration task this time. Although the core of the origin of all evils was not like the desolation cage connected to the Forbidden Valley of the Devil Emperor planet, which was a corner of the mysterious void from the Desolation era, after all, there were so many remains of creatures from the Desolation era. Anything related to the Desolation era couldn't be simple. There were only 25 days left. Yi Xian was not confident at all. But he still didn't give up. After recovering from the shock, Yi Xian took a deep breath to adjust his state of mind. He forced himself to calm down and then urged the mechanical bug to move forward again. Of course, on the way, he stayed thousands of miles away from the ancient creature's remains, which were emitting powerful auras. He didn't dare to get too close for fear of misfortune. His cultivation was too weak. Even though Yi Xian was in the universe realm, the 15th realm, he wouldn't let go of those ancient creatures' remains easily. Each of them was precious flesh and bones. Some of them even had golden blood flowing in them. Those things were the real medicines of flesh and blood. If they were put into the Shennon cauldron to be boiled and refined, the pills refined would definitely be extraordinary. They might even be able to revive the dead. Unfortunately, he had to give up now. Fortunately, no one dared to explore this void. Even if they did, they would be scared out of their wits when they reached the periphery of the core hinterland and saw the powerful beings of Universe Realm and Starlord Realm everywhere. In fact, this was indeed the case. Even Emperor Xiaofeng and the others had stopped at that area 3 times before. They hadn't reached the depths of the core hinterland. They didn't dare to move forward at all. At this moment, Yi Xian could only brace himself and keep moving forward. This was because the tidal exploration task couldn't be failed. Otherwise, the price would be too high. After another 3 days, 8 days had passed. Finally, there was a different scene in the void ahead. For an entire 3 days, Yi Xian didn't know how many terrifying corpses of ancient creatures Yi Xian had seen along the way. Both he and Chanas were numb to it. At this moment, a corner of silvery white light suddenly appeared in front of him in this pitch-black void. In this pitch-black void, there was a strong divine aura. Chapter 3503. The gigantic cauldron that radiated a divine, milky white radiance was like a gigantic star. Furthermore, it was slowly rotating, indicating that it possessed some sort of special power. And this power was still present. The power of the sacred cauldron was still operating. The outer walls of the cauldron were engraved with countless cryptic runes. Yi Xian did not recognize a single one of them. He stared at any of the runes for a long time and felt his eyes swell with pain. Even his primordial spirit was somewhat unstable. Apart from this, there were also countless chains on the body of the giant cauldron. One end of the chains was connected to the cauldron, seemingly entering the interior of the cauldron. The other end of the chains was deep into the cracks of the void in the distance. There were countless chains like this, but their functions were clearly different. On each chain there was a bit of light flowing slowly, but the direction of the light was flowing was different. Some of the radiance on the chains extended into the depths of the void and flowed into the cauldron. It seemed to be transporting something into the cauldron. And some of the radiance on the chains flowed from the end of the cauldron to the depths of the void in the distance. It seemed that something was being transported out of the cauldron through these chains. If this was really the case, then this gigantic cauldron that was like a star was clearly a transfer station. Some things were being transported in from the cracks of the void. After being transformed by the cauldron, they would then be transported out through the chains. No one knew what was being transported into the cauldron, and no one knew where it came from. And even more so, no one knew what was being transported out of the cauldron, and where it was ultimately being transported to. Just as Yi Xian was shocked by all this and did not know what to do, the cauldron in front of him suddenly changed. Rumble. Boom! A huge rumbling sound rang out. Of the countless chains connected to the cauldron, dozens of them suddenly lit up. The radiance flowing on the chains instantly grew brighter. Yi Xian noticed that these chains were all of that kind of radiance. It was the kind that flowed from the cracks of the void into the cauldron. In other words, these dozens of chains that suddenly lit up should be transporting something into the cauldron. Each chain was segmented, not a pipe. But Yi Xian clearly felt that something was flowing along the chains, transforming into radiance, and being transported into the cauldron. This situation lasted for about a minute. The dozens of chains that suddenly lit up suddenly returned to normal. The speed of the cauldron also spun faster, but it was still very slow. After all, the size of the cauldron was there. What was strange was that no matter how the cauldron spun, the countless chains did not move. They were suspended in the void of the void, majestically and silently, with only a dim radiance that flowing radiance. Soon, the star-like cauldron suddenly cracked and shook violently. A milky white light gushed out from the top of the cauldron, as if something was about to rush out from inside. This kind of scene was very similar to the strange phenomena that occurred before the birth of some rare treasures. Both had the light of treasures soaring into the sky. Oh my God, a great creation. This is definitely a great creation. Behind Yi Xian, the commander of the demon royal guards, Chanas, who had woken up at some point, suddenly exclaimed excitedly, "The radiance of treasures is definitely a sign of the birth of a supreme treasure. Sha sha! Lord Sha, we are rich this time." Whoosh! Just as he finished speaking, a golden radiance rushed out from the huge cauldron. It seemed to be quite coincidental. It was actually coming toward the void where the mechanical demon bug was. Therefore, on the holographic three-dimensional screen in front of Yi Xian and Chanas, it seemed that the golden radiance was growing bigger. The golden radiance that shot out from the cauldron in a parabola was getting bigger and bigger. A strong sense of crisis suddenly struck Yi Xian's heart. He did not hesitate for a moment and immediately ordered the mechanical demon bug to retreat. Whoosh! Whoosh! The mechanical demon bug jumped with all its might, but this time, it retreated hundreds of miles in an instant. Then, it jumped a second time. Just like that, in just a few breaths, after jumping several times, it had already retreated more than 2,000 miles in the void. The golden radiance that was coming from the front finally landed. It hung in the void 10,000 miles away and did not move anymore. In the next moment, Yi Xian and Chanas saw the true appearance of the golden radiance. It was actually a corpse. It was a single-horned golden crow. It was 10,000 feet long, but only half of its body was visible. Its flesh and internal organs were all pale gold. The surface of its body was covered with black feathers. There were specks of golden light on its black feathers. Its entire body was enveloped by the golden flames that surged out of its body. However, these golden flames were not pure. There were gray spots. Its aura also surpassed the level of a Star-Lord. The mechanical demon bug could only look from 10,000 miles away. Once it got close, its alloy body would collapse. Oh my God! Chanas, who was still full of excitement a moment ago, fell to the ground again when he saw the appearance of the so-called precious treasure. He let out a scream, rolled his eyes and fainted again. Yi Xian also opened his mouth wide. This scene was so strange that even he was a little shocked. Following that, a thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind. He seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed drastically. He turned his head to look at the remains of the other desolate ancient creatures that were lying in the air. He cried out involuntarily. Could it be that all the chains that are flowing from the end of the void crack to the direction of the cauldron are transporting the remains of these primordial creatures into the cauldron? Then, where did these chains come from? Is it similar to the mysterious void where the true body of the void giant tortoise is in the sea of abyss turtles? And this one-legged golden crow with impure bloodline and the remains of the primordial creatures in the void around are all defective products that were spat out by the giant cauldron? Even the remains of this type of existence are not qualified, not accepted, thrown away like trash. Then, how powerful would the remains that could be left behind in the enormous furnace be? Are they the remains of the primordial masters or the supreme beings of the primordial times? If everything is true, then what does this giant cauldron get in the end when it refines the remains of the primordial creatures that are qualified? What is the destination of these final products through another type of chain? The truth was simply horrifying. What kind of existence could actually create such a refining system? Even the void giant tortoise, which was a supreme being of the primordial times, could have been used as raw materials. Perhaps when it was finally destroyed by the demonic blade on its back in that mysterious void, its body was also destroyed. Chapter 3504. Yi Xian's conjecture was too shocking and terrifying. Although Yi Xian didn't want to believe or accept it, he knew that this was the truth. The one who made all this was most likely the commander of the enemy camp, the green eye of the heavenly way that was suspected to represent the will of the heavenly way in untainted land. The ancient cage connected to the forbidden valley of the Devil Emperor planet was his work. This void refining grand array, which was more complicated and purposeful, was also his handiwork. In the unparalleled war in untainted land, the camp of the headless baby was obviously defeated. Therefore, the loser had no right or spare energy to take care of the post-war arrangements. Only the victorious side had the ability and leisure to make all these arrangements. Yi Xian had been wondering why there were so many powerful primordial masters in untainted land, including the green eye of the heavenly way, but he hadn't seen any of them in this era. Now, it seemed that none of them had fallen. They were all dormant. Maybe it was because they were seriously injured, or maybe it was because of some other scheme. For example, Yi Xian already had a slight understanding of the void refinement formation in front of him. He even had an astonishing guess of the materials refined within the enormous cauldron. However, Yi Xian still had no idea about its ultimate purpose. No matter how imaginative he was, he couldn't figure out the scheme of the green eye of the heavenly way. In the unparalleled war in untainted land, it was obvious that many powerful creatures of the untainted land were seriously injured and dormant. For example, the giant tortoise of the void was one of them. In the mysterious unknown plane where it was dormant, there were more creatures of the untainted land. The green eye of the heavenly way was so horrible that it was actually consuming their vitality. Once they fell, It would use their remains to refine them in this huge furnace. What was it extracting? Where would the refined substance be transported to along another kind of chain of light? What kind of existences would benefit from it in the end? All of this entangled in Yi Xian's mind, turning into one huge question after another that circled endlessly. For a moment, he actually forgot about the quest for the system's title. All of his thoughts were focused on the terrifying secret of the primordial era in front of him. It was also at this moment that a sudden change occurred. Just as Yi Xian's mind was spinning endlessly as he pondered over everything before him, he suddenly felt a burning sensation in front of his chest. Then, a vicious howl filled with monstrous resentment suddenly rang out. The headless corpse, which had been in a dormant state all this time, seemed to have sensed something and suddenly woke up. Yi Xian was shocked, and then his expression turned solemn. Everything in front of him was the same as the ancient cage connected to the Forbidden Valley of the Demon Emperor Star. They were all suspected to be the work of the commander of the enemy camp, the Heavenly Green Eye. It was the archenemy of the headless infant corpse. Moreover, there must be some kind of secret plot here. It was some kind of arrangement made by the enemy after the great battle that had lasted from the remote antiquity to the present. If the headless infant corpse didn't know about it, it would be fine. But now that it knew and saw it with its own eyes, how could it not be angry? What's that sound? The vicious howl of the headless infant corpse was too shocking. Not only was Yi Xian startled, but even the commander of the Demon Emperor Guards, Chanas, who had just fainted, was also awakened. He crawled up with a face full of horror. He asked while looking around, because he felt that he had just vaguely heard something. The terrifying howl did not seem to come from outside the ship, but from inside the mechanical worm's abdomen. It was also at this moment that a blood-red light rushed out from Yi Xian's chest and turned into a headless infant corpse that was about a foot in size in the blink of an eye. It floated in front of Yi Xian. The infant corpse's neck was headless, and its head was in its arms. Its eyes, which had been tightly closed, suddenly opened at this moment, and its eyes were filled with green lines. They were ferocious and terrifying, and they happened to meet the gaze of Chanas, who had just crawled up. Oh my God! Such a scene was too terrifying. A baby that was no more than a foot in size was actually hugging its own head and staring at him ferociously with its eyes wide open. No one would be able to stand it. Chanas screamed, his eyes rolled back, and he quickly passed out again. Yi Xian did not even look at him. His eyes were already fixed on the headless infant corpse that was floating in front of him. His chest rose and fell, and he looked very excited. It's out! It's finally out! At this moment, there was only one sentence in his mind. Of course, there were countless questions behind this sentence. However, at this moment, Yi Xian did not know where to start. Ever since he met the headless infant corpse, the latter had been with Yi Xian, turning into a corpse lamp tattoo that was attached to Yi Xian's left chest. It had even helped Yi Xian escape many times. However, in reality, Yi Xian had very few chances to meet the headless infant corpse. Even when they fought the Heaven's Green Eye clone in the desolate ancient cage together, Yi Xian had immediately lost consciousness after shooting a heaven-falling bow ability. There was simply no time to meet the headless infant corpse. The headless infant corpse communicated face to face. During the time that it was attached to his body, no matter how Yi Xian called out to it, the headless infant corpse did not respond. This made Yi Xian very speechless, and even angry. However, there was nothing he could do. Now that the headless infant corpse had finally come out, Yi Xian even felt that this was too surreal, so it was natural for him to be so agitated. What's going on? Why did you choose me? Why did you attach yourself to me in the form of a corpse lamp tattoo? Also, I saw the void giant tortoise's true form. It's in an unknown universe, and there are many similar primordial creatures there. There's a huge black demonic blade on the void giant tortoise's back. It's always been there. During that battle, I saw it many times in the inheritance images. Didn't the void giant tortoise not participate in the battle? Why was it injured? Do you have a way to save it? Screech! Before Yi Xian could finish his questions like a machine gun, the headless infant corpse floating in front of Yi Xian let out another screech. This time, it was even angrier than before. It was clearly because it heard Yi Xian mention the void giant tortoise. However, in the end, it was because the void giant tortoise itself that made it angry. After all, the giant tortoise did not appear on the battlefield back then. Or was it because the void giant tortoise was injured and on the verge of death that made it angry? Yi Xian had no way to tell. Chapter 3505. By the time Yi Xian reacted, the headless corpse had once again transformed into a corpse lamp tattoo. At the same time, it was on his left chest, causing him to be completely stunned on the spot. His entire person was in a bad state. After a long time, Yi Xian roared furiously. It was too infuriating. It was not easy to catch this guy out for once. While he was shocked, he finally asked a part of the doubts in his heart. But it was good. It just hissed again and threw a look at him to let him slowly understand it. Then it went back inside. Not only did Yi Xian's doubts not get answered, but he also had another one. For example, why did the headless infant corpse react so strongly when he mentioned the void giant turtle? Was it because of the void giant tortoise itself that it suddenly became angry? Or was it because it was heavily injured and on the verge of death? This was a completely different concept. If it was the former, then it meant that the reason why the void turtle didn't appear in that battle all those years ago was because it had two hearts. In that case, even if Yi Xian would still follow the instructions of the nether turtle ancestor to think of a way to save it, his goal would be different. However, not only did the headless infant corpse not answer, it didn't even give him half a hint. This was driving him crazy. After roaring for a while, there was still no reaction from his chest. Just as Yi Xian was about to dejectedly give up, the corpse lamp tattoo on his chest suddenly heated up again. Immediately after, a voice appeared in Yi Xian's mind. It was distant, but there was a childish tenderness to it. Go, enter the netherworld furnace. I will protect you. Take as much as you can. When you have to retreat, I will warn you. Netherworld furnace. Protect me? Take as much as you can? Recalling the contents of these two sentences, Yi Xian was stunned at first, but then his heart began to pound wildly. The headless infant corpse's meaning was very clear. It wanted him to enter the huge furnace in front of him and fish for good fortune. Take as much as he could. Originally, Yi Xian couldn't even get close to the waste in the surrounding void that the furnace didn't care about, let alone enter the so-called netherworld furnace. But since the infant corpse had given such an explanation, it must be fine. In addition, when it was time to retreat, it would warn Yi Xian. What was there to worry about? Nothing ventured. Nothing gained. Even an idiot would know that the cauldron in front of them was extremely terrifying. Not even cosmic lords could get close to it, let alone enter it. The corpses of primordial creatures beyond the cosmic lord level littered the void around them were proof of that. However, Yi Xian was very confident in the headless infant corpse's abilities. Although this void refinement array was set up by the heavenly Dao Green Eye that was suspected to be the avatar of the primordial heavenly Dao, the headless infant corpse was an existence that could fight against it head-on. That fellow was not here now. Even if the headless infant corpse was not in good condition, it should still be fine if it protected him and walked in. What was the problem? Thinking of this, Yi Xian was immediately tempted. Now that Chanas had fainted, it saved him some trouble. Immediately, he stepped out of the mechanical demon bug's abdomen and appeared in the void outside. Then, with a wave of his hand, he kept the mechanical demon bug into the undying world in his body. Of course, he kept it in with everything sealed, in case Chanas woke up and saw something that he shouldn't see. After doing all this, Yi Xian felt his chest heat up again. A faint green, blood-red light shot out and spread. Finally, it enveloped Yi Xian's entire body, as if there was a layer of blood-red film on the surface of his body. The strange thing was that Yi Xian couldn't sense this blood-red film at all. It clearly existed and could be seen, but Yi Xian couldn't touch it at all. When he raised his hand to touch it, he could only touch his own body and the transformed clothes. The headless infant corpse's means were indeed extraordinary. Obviously, the protective means it was talking about was this blood-red film. Such an inconspicuous film could protect Yi Xian as he entered that so-called netherworld furnace, where even Star-Lords couldn't get close. This was really inconceivable, but Yi Xian firmly believed it. However, this gave him a very strange feeling. Although he was extremely confident in the methods of the headless infant corpse, out of habit, Yi Xian was still very careful at first. He slowly approached and quickly entered within 10,000 kilometers of the remains of a Star-Lord-level desolate ancient creature in the surrounding space. As expected, the feeling of his body being torn apart didn't appear. This layer of blood-red film was indeed miraculous. It directly isolated the pressure that originally existed. Yi Xian's heart thumped. He glanced at this ancient creature that, even though it had fallen for an unknown number of years, still exuded a pressure that far exceeded that of a Star Lord-level creature. Some of the wounds on its body still had some golden blood flowing. Yi Xian wanted to collect it. He could use the Shengnong cauldron to refine great medicines. Just as he was about to approach, the corpse lamp tattoo on his chest burned again, revealing a hint of urging. It seemed to be somewhat impatient. It was unknown whether the headless infant corpse felt that Yi Xian was too slow or that he was picking up sesame seeds and throwing away watermelons. He didn't want the good things in the sacred netherworld furnace in front of him, but he actually picked up these wastes. No matter which one it was, Yi Xian could only give up on his original plan. He shook his head and bitterly smiled as his figure quickly flashed forward, completely ignoring the blood and flesh of some of the terrifying creatures he saw along the way. After a short while, he arrived in front of the enormous star furnace that the headless infant corpse called the Netherworld Furnace. Feng. As they got closer, the star-like furnace seemed even larger. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks and raised his head to look. Just as he glanced at it, the corpse lamp tattoo on his left chest burned once again. The meaning was the same, urging him on again. You don't have to be in such a hurry to reincarnate, right? I have to see clearly where to enter from. Yi Xian was speechless. He rolled his eyes and then leaped up to the top of the giant star furnace. What he saw was a milky white mist, like an atmosphere, shrouding the entrance above the giant star furnace. Although this thing was huge, it was in the shape of a cauldron. Therefore, the entrance should be above. In fact, the corpse of the one-legged golden crow was indeed spat out from the top of the cauldron. Yi Xian didn't hesitate any longer. He jumped down and passed through the thick, liquid-like milky white mist. Soon, he arrived in the inner world of the giant star furnace. During this process, Yi Xian's whole body felt slightly cold. He felt that some matter, or rather energy, passed through the blood-green membrane of the headless infant corpse's body and came into contact with his skin. It entered his body through his pores, making him feel as if he was floating in the air. Its miraculous effect was only second to a few legendary treasured liquids such as the Chaos Divine Liquid. However, Yi Xian had absorbed several cubic meters of it, which was simply shocking. However, this was only possible because of the headless infant corpse. Otherwise, even a terrifying existence beyond the Star-Lord state wouldn't have been able to do so. He couldn't even get close to this huge cauldron, let alone absorb the netherworld furnace lotion inside it. At this moment, as Yi Xian descended from the top of the cauldron and entered the star cauldron, the scene inside was finally reflected in his eyes. The scene was too shocking. It was far better than what he had seen outside the cauldron. Even though Yi Xian had been mentally prepared, he was still shocked. He floated in the air inside the cauldron and stared blankly at everything in front of him. He couldn't help but tremble slightly. He couldn't control his trembling at all. No wonder the headless infant corpse called the cauldron a netherworld furnace. This place was indeed like infernal prison. Previously, when Yi Xian was in the void outside, he'd already had this feeling when he saw the remains of the desolate ancient creatures around him. But now, after entering the cauldron and seeing everything clearly, he suddenly felt that what he saw outside was really nothing. It was because it was too ordinary. Compared to that, everything inside this huge cauldron was truly shocking. This was the real infernal purgatory, and it was even better than that. At this moment, Yi Xian deeply understood the essence of the term netherworld furnace. The so-called netherworld furnace referred to the netherworld in front and the furnace behind. Everything in front of him was more terrifying than the infernal prison. It was indeed worthy of the name Netherworld. Chapter 3507. Rumble. Kachak kachak. Both voices were very low, and they weren't very hurried. They seemed to be slow and sluggish. Originally, they shouldn't have had such a soul-stirring effect, but when they entered Yi Xian's ears, they clearly caused his body to tremble even more violently. The rumbling was the sound of the furnace of flesh and blood turning inside the cauldron. The strange cracking noises were the sound of the flesh and blood of a large number of powerful primordial creatures being crushed by the cauldron, turning into minced meat and bones. It was a horrifying scene. Truly horrifying. There were two areas inside the cauldron. In the center was a huge millstone with 2 levels and a hole in the middle. At this moment, the huge hole contained the remains of many primordial creatures, moving up and down as the millstone rotated in reverse. This was a true furnace of flesh and blood. Yi Xian even saw the remains of half of the golden divine dragon's body within the countless mountains of corpses and seas of blood in this enormous hole. Of course, it wasn't the golden divine dragon that had left behind the inheritance for him. It should be a descendant of the clan that had yet to grow to the primordial sovereign. Even so, this divine golden dragon should be extremely powerful. Even though it had fallen countless years ago and only left behind half of its body, Yi Xian still felt an incomparably powerful pressure assaulting his face. It was far more powerful than those abandoned existences in the void outside the cauldron. In addition, Yi Xian also saw an ancient Xianxia. Its aura was also extremely powerful, close to that of a primordial supreme like the Void Ladle. Although it couldn't be the one that had inherited the Skyfall Bow's bloodline ability from Yi Xian, their bloodline must be extremely close. Even if it wasn't a direct descendant, it should be within 3 generations of direct bloodline. Apart from that, the remains of Bloodthirst Lion, Cyan Sky Rock, 9-headed Blood Dragon, Demonic Blood Dragon, and other creatures from the Primordial Era that were close to or slightly weaker than Supreme Primordial Era were everywhere. But without exception, all of them were incomplete. Moreover, they had been crushed into pieces of flesh and bones of different sizes by the huge furnace of flesh and blood. This wasn't the end. As the huge furnace of flesh and blood slowly rotated, the remains of primordial creatures in the center of the millstone were also crushed. Gradually, even Yi Xian couldn't recognize their original appearance. Whether it was the divine golden dragon, the Xianxia, the bloodlust lion, or the azure sky rock, all the remains of primordial creatures were crushed into mincemeat and mixed together. The flesh and bones that were emitting all kinds of auspicious light blended and mixed with each other. The sparkling precious blood of different colors mixed together. Chapter 3508. Yi Xian naturally wouldn't allow the enemy's strategic resources to fall into his hands. He was prepared to make a sneaky move, so he had to take them all in one go. If possible, he even wanted to refine the core of this void refining formation, this giant furnace, just like how he had refined the farmer god cauldron in the heavenly Battlestar region. However, just as this thought surfaced in his mind, Yi Xian felt a sudden heat on the left side of his chest. The headless corpse was warning him. Obviously, this wasn't realistic. Either Yi Xian couldn't do it, or doing so would trigger unforeseen and severe consequences. The headless corpse wouldn't allow it. Yi Xian sighed. He could only take a step back and seek for resources. He had his eyes on the resources within the cauldron. After looking around, Yi Xian locked onto his target. The flesh grindstone in the center was very large. Although the amount of transparent liquid that dripped out from the slits around the grindstone was very small, it took a long time for a single drop to appear. However, the thin line was long enough so the amount was still quite considerable. Of course, it couldn't compare to the thin netherworld furnace lotion in the air. Yi Xian immediately took out a small spatial bottle and began to work. He circled the giant furnace millstone and began to collect the transparent liquid. Dong! A drop of transparent liquid fell into the bottle, producing a very textured and pleasant sound. Yi Xian moved and collected another drop of transparent liquid that was falling into the bottle. After circling the millstone once, he had collected a total of 700 to 800 drops of transparent liquid. At this time, the slits around the furnace had temporarily stopped dripping. However, the 9-colored flesh in the giant hole in the center was still churning. Clearly, it was brewing the next round of transparent liquid. Since he had no choice but to wait, Yi Xian tried to extract a drop of transparent liquid from the jade bottle in his hand. He let it float in front of his eyes and carefully observed it. This drop of liquid was pure and transparent, like the highest grade of crystal. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that there were mysterious runes, chains, and the like flashing within. This was very strange. It was clearly a transparent and pure object, but he could see the mysterious runes and chains within it. Yi Xian almost suspected that he was hallucinating. It was also at this moment that a familiar system notification sounded in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the source of all evil. Grade: Starry Sky Treasure. Attribute: Laws of Nature, Origin, Natural Spiritual Liquid. Do you want to refine it now? What? Was this the root of all evil? As the system notification rang in his mind, Yi Xian's body shook violently as a look of disbelief appeared on his face. It was too unexpected. Chapter 3509. A single drop of the origin of all evil had allowed Yi Xian to obtain such a huge benefit. Not only had his cultivation base and physical body, but even the various bloodline abilities, mental strength secret techniques, and so on had all increased in level. All in all, his overall battle strength had skyrocketed compared to before. This made him realize the preciousness of this mysterious spirit liquid, the source of all evil, almost instantly. Even if the harvest this time was only because he refined it for the first time, and might not be able to achieve this effect in the future, the fact that it could only be encountered and not sought after still could not be erased. Overjoyed, Yi Xian did not immediately activate the permission to randomly activate a new ability of the system that he had obtained from completing the system's exploration mission. Instead, he glanced at the mysterious millstone in the center of the huge furnace again. At this time, some faint transparent water stains had appeared in the cracks around the millstone again. Obviously, more drops of the spiritual liquid of the origin of all evil would drip down soon. Yi Xian was pleasantly surprised. His figure flashed and he moved around the huge millstone. Every time he saw a drop of the spiritual liquid of the origin of all evil, he would immediately reach out and grab the small space bottle. Then he heard a soft sound, which was pleasing to the ear and soothing to the heart. This meant that there was now one more drop of the spiritual liquid of the origin of all evil in his hand. This time, perhaps because the 9-colored flesh and blood in the huge hole in the center of the millstone had decreased a lot, the transparent liquid that flowed out from the cracks around the millstone was obviously less than the previous round. Moreover, the speed of the liquid dripping down was much slower. After a while, Yi Xian's harvest this time was only about half of the previous round's harvest. The total of the 2 rounds of spiritual liquid of the origin of all evil was only slightly more than 1,000 drops. From the looks of it, the 3rd round of spiritual liquid of the origin of all evil would be even less, unless the chains that were circling the inner wall of the furnace above to transport the flesh and blood into the furnace once again transported a new batch of remains of the desolate era creatures from the cracks in the void and threw them into the huge hole in the center of the millstone. This was to replenish the raw materials. Perhaps only then would the speed of the spiritual liquid drop increase again. However, Yi Xian could not wait any longer. He could feel that the corpse lantern tattoo on the left side of his chest was starting to heat up. Although the headless corpse did not give off any warning signs, Yi Xian knew that he did not have much time left in this cauldron. Who knew when the next batch of desolate era corpses would arrive? It had always been hiding in space to recover. During this period of time, it would be able to enjoy a few drops of the source of all evil condensed from the laws of stars within the bodies of countless powerful primordial beings through the netherworld furnace chains set up by the green eye of the heaven's way. It had mostly recovered from its injuries. However, just earlier, the 3 drops of source of all evil that it was about to obtain had suddenly flowed in reverse and been forcefully pushed back. This made it almost go mad with rage. It almost wanted to follow the netherworld furnace chains that hung down from space above to see what exactly had happened. Unfortunately, its injuries were too heavy in the end. It was utterly unable to tear through space and directly descend to this plane. At this moment, it could only vent its anger and frustration with a deafening roar. Yi Xian was completely unaware of all of this. After absorbing 3 drops of all evil origin liquid from the first chain, Yi Xian's spirit was greatly boosted. The second chain closest to him was only about 10 meters away, so Yi Xian rushed over in 2 strides. Following the same pattern, he once again aimed the mouth of the small spatial bottle in his hand at the groove connected to the chain. The position. Afterwards, he activated the absorption ability of the spatial bottle. Afterwards, an extremely powerful suction force extended out from the opening of the spatial bottle due to the support from the headless corpse of the infant. The second chain immediately lit up as well. The runes flickered, and after a breath of time, a pleasant ding-dong sound rang out as a drop of all evil origin liquid fell into the bottle. Yi Xian waited for another 2 breaths of time, but there was no other movement. As it seemed, only a single droplet of source of all evil had been allocated to the chain. This greatly displeased Yi Xian. He muttered, "What a pauper! What a miser!" When he thought about how all the all-evil origin liquid dripping out of the slits and the ones that had already been dripped into the chains and were in the process of being transported, He was about to finish collecting all of them. Yi Xian's gaze began to sweep towards the hole in the center of the huge millstone. It had been so long, but the chains that circled the inner walls of the cauldron had not delivered a second batch of raw materials. In other words, this matter was probably over for the time being. Perhaps there would only be one batch a year, 2 years, 10 years, or 100 years. After all, this netherworld cauldron had stood here for countless years. It was likely that 1 or 2 unqualified remains of primordial creatures would be spat out every time. Although there were quite a few of these inferior corpses in the surrounding void, no matter how many there were, they were only a few 100 million at most. According to this ratio, Yi Xian quickly deduced that the raw materials for the flesh and blood of these ancient creatures would only arrive once every 1 or 2 years. This was basically the truth. Since that was the case, after collecting all of the all-evil origin liquid in the chains and seizing all of the harvest of this flesh and blood primordial land for a year, Yi Xian basically had nothing to gain from this place. Unless he waited another year. But that was obviously impossible. Unforeseen circumstances would occur, and the headless corpse protecting him might not be able to last that long. I'm really unwilling to accept this. The harvest is still too little. At this thought, Yi Xian sighed. It just so happened that the 2 drops of all evil origin liquid in the last chain had been forcibly collected. He immediately flipped his hand and sent the space bottle into the undying world in his body. Then, as he muttered to himself, he took out a new empty bottle from the undying world and leaped towards the giant hole in the center of the millstone. Although I've collected all the all-evil origin liquid, there are still some remnants of 9-colored flesh in this hole. These are all powerful primordial creatures. Since Yi Xian wanted to play dirty, then even if he couldn't poison a few of them to death on the spot, he would at least have to affect their recovery or leave a poisonous root in their bodies. Otherwise, this matter would be meaningless. Among all the poisons in his possession, only the undying and imperishable bead was capable of doing this. The so-called undying and imperishable bead was a primordial treasure. It was definitely the king of poisons, condensed from the boundless resentment and filth of those who had fallen in the great battle of the primordial era. It was definitely a supreme treasure for underhandedness. However, the poison of this bead was too terrifying. Once it was poisoned, it would spread across a large area. If it was not contained in time after it spread, it would probably cause an entire universe to fall. It was too destructive, so Yi Xian did not dare to use it at all. He was afraid that it would involve too much karma. However, it was different this time. They were enemies to begin with. Although Yi Xian did not participate in the great battle all those years ago, the headless corpse of the infant had always been with him in this life. Moreover, the bloodline abilities and secret techniques that he had grasped were all related to him. They all originated from the supreme primordial figures of his own faction. Therefore, Yi Xian had unknowingly been dragged into this matter. This was a move against an enemy faction, so it was only right and proper. There was no need for him to be afraid of being involved in unnecessary karma. However, although the undying and indestructible poison contained within the undying and imperishable bead was definitely effective against the supreme beings of the primordial era or the supreme beings of the primordial era at the end of the chains, this bead was extremely precious. Yi Xian only had 2 of them in his possession, and one of them was slightly flawed because it had been used in the Shenong cauldron before. It was condensed into a bead after the former god cauldron had been reformed. The other was perfect and had never been used before. Just these 2 beads alone might be of great use in the future. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, Yi Xian did not intend to use them. They were too precious. Apart from the undying and imperishable bead, Yi Xian also had various other resources in his possession. Some of these resources were highly toxic, and could even be called strange poisons. Although they were rare, they paled in comparison to the undying and imperishable bead. Moreover, he had a certain amount of these things on hand. If he used some of them, he would not have to worry about running out. He acted as soon as he thought of this. He immediately descended and arrived at the groove around the millstone. This huge millstone was originally used to refine. Even the karma and resentment of the powerful primordial beings within the 9-colored flesh paste could be removed, dispersing as green smoke. Therefore, the poison naturally could not be placed in the hole at the center. After being refined by the millstone, it would all disperse. That would be a waste of effort. Yi Xian directly arrived at the groove. After waiting for a while, he finally saw a drop of all evil origin elixir drip down and roll around in the groove. He no longer hesitated. He immediately took out large amounts of various poisonous powders and liquids and poured them all down. Unfortunately, the results left him speechless. All of the poisonous powders and liquids would immediately disperse as soon as they came into contact with the groove. They could not exist at all, let alone fuse with the drop of all evil origin elixir that was currently dripping towards one of the chains. It seemed that these things were ultimately not useful and could not be put to good use. Yi Xian was speechless. He could only put them all away, not daring to waste any more. He then took out the undying and imperishable bead. Of course, it was the one with a flaw. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have discovered a primordial poison. Undying and imperishable bead. Contains the boundless resentment of those who perished in the primordial war. It gathers the resentment of the world and condenses it into a bead. Grade: primordial treasure. Quality: perfect, slightly flawed. Do you wish to use it immediately? As soon as the flawed undying and imperishable bead was taken out, a familiar system notification rang out in Yi Xian's mind. However, he did not use it immediately. After all, there were still other drops of all evil origin elixir that had yet to drip down. After a moment of hesitation, he simply put away the drop that had already dripped into a new bottle and waited by the groove. A short while later, a total of 18 drops of all evil origin elixir entered the spatial bottle. At this point, the 9-colored meat paste in the hole in the center of the millstone was also gone. Even the millstone's rotation gradually slowed down, returning to the state it was in before the raw materials were thrown in. It seemed that it was just as he had guessed. This void refining formation was activated in waves and was not eternally rotating. Otherwise, how could there be so many primordial creatures' flesh as raw materials? The next time would probably be at least a year later. After confirming this, Yi Xian's heart calmed down. As far as he was concerned, everything here was done, except for one last thing. Chapter 35:12. After shaking it a few times, Yi Xian confirmed that the undying and imperishable bead had taken effect and fused with the 18 drops of all evil origin fluid. Now they had all turned into all evil poison. As such, he stopped and carefully removed the cork of the small spatial bottle to take a look inside. As expected, the undying and imperishable bead had already disappeared. There was only a thin layer of liquid at the bottom of the bottle. What was strange was that there were exactly 18 drops, but the color was slightly different. However, the change was very faint, and one would not be able to see it without looking carefully. This meant that the undying and imperishable bead had indeed taken effect. Moreover, its poison had directly dissolved and affected the original 18 drops of all evil origin fluid, leaving no traces behind. This made it even more reliable. There would not be any impurities discovered and be discovered by those primordial experts or even primordial sovereigns at the end of the chains. Exhaling lightly, Yi Xian immediately extracted all the all-evil poison from the bottle. However, he did not pour all of it out at once. He left behind a third of it, which was 6 drops. After all, this was not something that could be obtained easily. 18 drops of all evil origin fluid consumed an entire undying and imperishable bead. Although Yi Xian still had an undying and imperishable bead, he would definitely not use it like this next time. Therefore, the 18 drops of all evil poison in his hand were extremely precious. Yi Xian decided to leave behind 6 drops and store them in the small spatial bottle. After plugging the bottle, he flipped his hand and stored them away in his undying world. At this moment, there were a total of 12 drops of all evil poison floating in front of him. Originally, it could poison 12 heavily injured primordial experts or even primordial sovereigns, or important bloodline inheritances of opposing factions. However, considering that some of these fellows were stronger, 1 drop might not be enough. The effects might not be as good as expected. Therefore, Yi Xian decided to start with 9 chains. 6 of them had a drop of all evil poison in them. As for the other 3, he had forcefully snatched back 3 to 4 drops of all evil origin fluid. To be able to obtain so many drops, it was clear that the other party's identity was not ordinary. Therefore, Yi Xian had poisoned all 3 chains with 2 drops of all evil poison on each chain. When the first drop of all evil poison fell, Yi Xian's heart was in his throat. He was afraid that the previous situation would occur again. That would truly be a waste of his efforts. Fortunately, there was no problem this time. The moment the first drop of all evil origin fluid dripped, the chain lit up. Countless cryptic runes flickered and gradually extended into the distance. This was a sign that the drop of all evil poison was being transported to its target in a way that Yi still did not understand. He was immediately relieved and grinned. Then, he dripped the other 11 drops of all evil origin liquid onto the other 5 chains he had chosen. End chains 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 chains. Chains chains Yi Xian Yi. At this moment, the corpse lantern tattoo on Yi Xian's left chest finally heated up again. This was the headless infant corpse's warning, reminding Yi Xian that he should leave now. The headless infant corpse must have sensed everything Yi Xian had done before, but it did not do anything. This meant that the infant corpse was very satisfied. It was probably very happy inside. It was rare to see the enemy's strategic resources being plundered so wantonly by its own spokesperson. At this moment, the headless infant corpse was also waiting for Yi Xian to drip the 12 drops of all evil poison on the 6 chains before giving the warning. This meant 2 things. First, the headless infant corpse was very supportive of this matter, so it did not stop Yi Xian when he was doing it. It was probably also very happy inside. Second, the headless infant corpse immediately warned Yi Xian to leave as soon as he dripped the 12 drops of all evil poison on the 6 chains. This meant that once the poison reached the end of the chains, it would definitely trigger some unknown unforeseen event. There was no benefit in staying here. This place had become a place of trouble. If he stayed, he would attract the attention of certain people. With that in mind, Yi Xian did not stay any longer. He instantly broke through the white atmosphere and reached the cauldron. He had originally planned to throw the super death ray bomb that he had prepared for the Heavenly Fate Race's base camp into the cauldron and detonate it. However, considering the level of the cauldron, which was probably an ultimate treasure of the primordial era, he eventually gave up. Of course, the more important reason was that he was worried that he would attract the attention of the Heavenly Fate Race. If that happened, Yi Xian might not have enough time to leave. He had gained a lot this time. There was no need to take the risk again. After leaving the cauldron, Yi Xian once again saw the remains of the primordial creatures in the void around the cauldron. The ones close to the cauldron were all terrifying beings whose auras surpassed the Star-Lord state. The remains of the primordial creatures at the Star-Lord state and the Cosmos state were further away. An idea flashed in Yi Xian's head. Taking advantage of the fact that the protective membrane of the headless baby's body was still around, he dashed toward the remains of the powerful primordial creatures that were beyond the Star-Lord state. It wasn't easy for him to come here, and this time, he even obtained the help of the headless infant corpse. Chapter 35-13. When Yi Xian fought for the all-evil origin elixir, he had chosen the end of the spatial crack connected to by the first chain. It was a mysterious place that was unfathomably distant from the region of origin of all evil, separated by who knows how many universes. The exotic beast covered in blood-red scales was unable to tear through space and descend from another plane due to its severe injuries. At this moment, it could only vent its frustration and anger with its deafening roars, letting out shrill roars one after another. This strange beast covered in blood-red scales was terrified because the aura emanating from its body clearly belonged to a supreme being of the primordial era who was at the same level as the golden divine dragon and the primordial Xianxia. It had been severely injured in an unprecedented battle all those years ago, causing its wheel of the great Tao to crack, and it had always been hiding in this void to recover. Originally, its injuries had already mostly healed. However, just earlier, the 3 droplets of all evil origin elixir that it was about to obtain suddenly flowed backwards, forcefully returning to its original position. Right now, as the blood-red unicorn roared thunderously, the chain above its head suddenly shone brightly again. Some complicated inscriptions flickered on it. This was clearly a sign that the all-evil origin elixir was about to fall. The blood-red unicorn stopped roaring furiously. It raised its head, and the fury in its eyes gradually subsided. Very soon, 2 droplets of all evil origin elixir fell from the end of the chain. Due to the darkness in space, the color of the 2 droplets of all evil origin elixir was slightly different from before. However, it did not notice this. It opened its mouth and immediately swallowed them. Roar! In the next moment, an earth-shattering roar rang out, causing the entire space to tremble. The blood-colored Qilin's body began to tumble in the air, its eyes emitting a dark light of resentment. A monstrous murderous aura surged into the sky, entering the chains that were suspended in the air above its head and flowing against the current. At the same time, in the ancestral grounds of the Blood Wyrm clan in the second universe. At this moment, In the secret realm in the deepest part of the Blood Wyrm clan's ancestral land, the space in the distance was already red, and a huge blood cloud was still surging. They could vaguely see a 9-headed blood dragon roaring furiously. Although its aura was not as strong as the supreme beings of the primordial era such as the golden divine dragon and the primordial Xianxia, it was no weaker than the almighty beings of the primordial era such as the void ladle. This 9-headed blood serpent was clearly heavily injured, and was completely recovering thanks to the nourishment of the all-evil origin liquid. The crazy roaring in its mouth also stopped abruptly, and it lowered its head to look. Hair. Blood-colored corpse hair. It grew densely from the huge blood-colored egg under it, turning it from a huge egg into a ball of hair in the blink of an eye. This was corpse hair. Its direct descendant had not yet been born and was still in the process of being nurtured, but it had already turned into a corpse in the egg. Even if the aura of life had not disappeared, which meant that it could continue to nurture, who knew what kind of monster would be born in the future? At the very least, it definitely could not be considered a pure 9-headed blood serpent anymore. This also meant that the bloodline inheritance that it had always cared about the most had finally been cut off today. This was because the more powerful a creature was, the more difficult it was for it to give birth to a descendant of its bloodline. This huge crimson egg that gave birth to its direct bloodline descendant was something the 9-headed blood Jiao dragon had given birth to when it was still very weak a long time before that unprecedented battle. Now, it was already a supreme existence of the primordial age. Even if it was severely injured and had yet to recover, and its combat strength was far from before, it was impossible for it to nurture another huge blood descendant egg. Roar! Roar! The 9-headed blood serpent could not accept all of this. The reason why it had persisted until now was because of its bloodline inheritance. However, everything had changed now. The 9-headed blood serpent was furious. After roaring for a while, an edict was sent out from the mystic realm where the blood serpent clan's bloodline ancestor resided. It turned into a blood-colored light and fell into the hands of the blood serpent clan's patriarch. In the next moment, the blood serpent clan's patriarch's body shook violently. Then, he roared toward the sky and revealed his bloodline true body, which was 100,000 feet tall. This was clearly a 6-headed blood serpent with a highly atavistic bloodline. Blood Ancestors Edict. Prepare for war. Unite the various races of the second universe and launch a joint attack on the first universe. Chapter 35:14. Following the 9-headed blood dragon's order, the prelude to a full-scale planar war was about to begin. At this moment, Yi Xian would never have thought that the things he had done in the core of the root of all evil would cause such serious consequences in the end. It was like the flapping of a butterfly's wings. It was unintentional, but it caused a catastrophic tsunami on the other side of the ocean. The root of all evil, as its name suggested, had become the true source of this turmoil. However, this war was supposed to come sooner or later. It was only because of the 9-headed blood dragon's order that the blood dragon clan moved and pushed the process forward. Therefore it was brought forward. The Blood Dragon clan was the strongest clan among the top 10 clans in the Federation of the Second Universe. Among the top 10 clans, there were several clans that were strategic allies. Once the Blood Dragon clan moved, these clans would definitely not stand idly by. A planar war was about to begin. In fact, the impact of Yi Xian's 12 drops of evil venom was not limited to this. There were only 6 chains on which he had chosen to drip the all-evil origin liquid, and 2 of them had already activated. The 9-headed blood flood dragon was so angry that it wanted to track down the true culprit who had cut off its bloodline inheritance that it had triggered a planar war in space that was about to begin. As for the blood-colored Qilin, it had just split off a strand of its divine beast primordial spirit and followed the chain down. In addition, 4 existences at the end of the chains were also affected. 2 of them chose to remain silent. Although they were roaring in their respective resting places, they did not do anything in the end. As for the other 2 terrifying existences, one was the supreme primordial demon crocodile from the primordial war. It was also arrogant and unruly. Like the scarlet unicorn, it chose to separate a strand of its demon crocodile primordial spirit and followed the chain down. The other one was also in the second universe. It was the ancestor of the Green Rock clan, which was ranked second among the top 10 clans in the Federation of the Second Universe. It was an azure rock. This azure sky rock was similar to the 9-headed blood Wyrm, and they were both born during the later period of the primordial era. In fact, when they were born, the incomparable battle of the primordial era had practically come to an end. However, they were still injured. Although they were powerful beings of the primordial era, they were severely injured in the end. As for the source of their bloodline, the Blood Sea Devil Dragon and the Kuan Pang, who were at the level of the Supreme Master of the primordial era, both died in that battle. Obviously, the Azure Sky Rock and the Nine-Headed Blood Dragon were the powerful forces of the same camp back then. Now that they were both ambushed at the same time, it was impossible for the two clans to let this matter go so easily. In the Second Universe's Federation, the top 3 races represented the entire Second Universe's Federation. Now, 2 of the top 3 races had already vowed to send troops to the First Universe. On the surface, they were waging war with the Celestials' legacy race, but they were secretly attacking the source of all evil and uncovering the true mastermind. Therefore, this battle was unavoidable. However, this kind of monstrous planar war couldn't start immediately. Preparing for it required time. The chaos of the war hadn't appeared yet. However, in the depths of the core hinterland of the First Universe's source of all evil, the consequences of Yi Xian's actions were immediately apparent. Clang! Clang! The sound of the chains grew louder and louder, and there were even loud rumbling noises. The entire starlight cauldron started to shake. A monstrous aura of slaughter wreaked havoc in this area of the void. Evil thoughts filled the sky. Yi Xian had already activated his full speed and rushed toward the edge of the core hinterland of the source of all evil. He wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. He didn't even dare to use the mechanical demon bug because it would be too big of a target. Yi Xian was worried that it would attract attention. Although he didn't know what was happening in the starlight cauldron behind him, he could roughly guess that the existences at the end of the 6 chains were enraged. The immortal and imperishable bead was no ordinary item. Even a supreme primordial would have to shed a layer of skin if he was suddenly ambushed. After all, it was originally condensed from the resentment and obsession of countless powerful primordial beings who had fallen in that incomparable battle. Moreover, even if the existences at the end of the 6 chains were truly almighty primordial beings or supreme primordial beings, they were far from what they were in the past and were in a state where they had yet to recover from their injuries. Judging from the current situation, some of those fellows must have suffered greatly because of Yi Xian's ambush. Otherwise, why would they be so enraged? In fact, although Yi Xian was frightened, he was still in a very good mood. After all, this kind of opportunity wouldn't come twice in this world. In fact, even in the primordial era, there were probably only 1 or 2 people who could ambush several almighty primordial beings and supreme primordial beings at the same time. Come on. Even thinking about it, Yi Xian felt that it was incomparably exciting. To be able to make the top existences of the enemy camp so miserable and unintentionally suffer such a huge loss, this kind of feeling was really too satisfying. However, even though it was satisfying, he still felt a sense of crisis. Chapter 35:15. Yi Xian slowed down as soon as he passed the edge of the core hinterland of the root of all evil and entered the buffer zone of the central region. He knew that a supreme being had descended from the cauldron. Even if it was only a consciousness, there was no chance for him to escape from the root of all evil. He had to leave the outer region of the star sector. If he maintained this extreme speed, he would be like a bright light in the dark night and would directly attract the attention of the other party. He did not think that the Supreme Being's consciousness would only search for the core hinterland of the root of all evil. Although that was the most important area, the Supreme Being would definitely not let go of the buffer zone of the central region and the outer region of the star sector. Even the cosmic void outside of the star sector of the root of all evil would be searched. At a time like this, the best thing to do was to lie low and conceal his aura as much as possible so that he could harmonize with his surroundings. At the very least, he would not stand out. Soon, Yi Xian came to a complete stop after leaving the buffer zone of the central region and the core hinterland of the root of all evil. He performed a perfect vibration of his spiritual power secret technique. However, he did not conceal his aura and body, as that would arouse suspicion. Instead, he transformed his body into an inconspicuous black beetle with average strength. At the same time, he tried his best to harmonize his aura with the void around him as if he had always been here and had not moved for a long time. In fact, all the black beetles in the void around him did the same. They were inert life forms to begin with. After doing all of this, Yi Xian's heart was still uneasy. However, he knew that he'd already done it perfectly. As for whether or not he could deceive the consciousness of the several supreme experts that had already descended into the cauldron, he could only resign himself to fate. Of course, he still had a certain amount of confidence because if he could not deceive it, He believed that he would not be in danger of dying. In a true life and death situation, the headless corpse would definitely not ignore it. Whoosh! Boom! Roar! Screech! The chains rattled, and the giant cauldron rumbled. Accompanied by the roar of a unicorn and a demon crocodile, a large part of the void in the core hinterland of the root of all evil was shaking. Then, two huge figures, both tens of thousands of feet tall, rushed into the sky from the giant cauldron. The aura of the supreme beings from the primordial era swept across the world. Over the endless years, the remains of the primordial era creatures were spat out from the giant cauldron like garbage or waste and abandoned in the void. Their remains, at this moment, collapsed and turned into ashes. The supreme consciousness of the crimson unicorn and the demon crocodile finally descended and rushed out of the giant cauldron. They were at the top of the star sector's core hinterland of the primordial supremes. Within a radius of 10,000 miles around them, everything was under their control. With a single thought, flowers bloomed and wilted, stars were born, and stars were fallen. That wasn't a problem. However, the power would quickly weaken when they were 10,000 kilometers away. In the core hinterland of the root of all evil, the space around the giant cauldron, where the remains of the primordial era creatures were located, was millions of kilometers away. Therefore, even though the supreme consciousness of the crimson unicorn and the demon crocodile still covered the vast void in the core hinterland of the root of all evil, their pressure was weakened when they reached the edge, where countless descendants of the powerful creatures were lurking and unwilling to leave. Their pressure was greatly weakened. Even so, all the powerful beings at the core of the root of all evil, be they Cosmos State, Star-Lord or beyond, chose to lay low instead of resisting when the two powerful consciousnesses were running rampant, as if they were looking for something. They wouldn't react too strongly even if the two consciousnesses brushed past them. They would at most wriggle uneasily. This allowed them to keep their lives, because the consciousnesses that swept past their bodies quickly left, not stopping, nor did they have the time to stop. They were currently searching for the most suspicious existences. When the Blood Kirin and the 9 Hell Demon Crocodile's consciousness entered the cauldron and saw everything, they immediately knew what had happened. Obviously, someone had snuck in and stolen the cauldron's harvest this year. At the same time, they had poisoned the cauldron with unknown and mysterious poison before leaving, so they wouldn't be able to escape. They were lucky. Although they were infuriated and wanted to destroy the entire space zone, that was obviously impossible. There would be more evil origin fluid next year, but the unknown culprit would probably escape soon. At this time, the blood-colored Qilin and the 9U demon crocodile did not even care about unleashing a massacre to vent their anger. Their only thought at this moment was to take advantage of the fact that the other party might not have escaped far away to find the detestable mastermind behind this. However, while they didn't have time to kill, some beings were determined to get themselves killed. For example, the Black Beetle Queen. At that moment, the Black Beetle Mother Empress had just finished pleasuring all 5 of the mechanical bugs and was still unsatisfied. Chapter 35:16. Roar! Screech! A unicorn's roar and a demon crocodile's roar resounded through the sky, shaking the wider void of the root of all evil's buffer zone. A scarlet unicorn and a 9 Hell demon crocodile were both 10,000 feet tall. Although they were energy consciousnesses, their pressure was incomparably strong. As the void shook, countless black beetles in the buffer zone of the central domain trembled. The one Yi Xian had transformed into was the same. It nestled at the edge of a group of black beetles. On the surface, it didn't look strange, but at this moment, his heart was twitching. He really didn't expect to provoke 2 supreme masters this time. Although it was only a strand of their consciousness that had descended upon this star field, the source of all evil, they were clearly 2 primordial supremes. Yi Xian vaguely remembered that in the inherited image of the fallen Sky Bao and other bloodline abilities, he had seen this scarlet unicorn in the enemy camp in the scene of the Great Battle of the Primordial Era. At that time, it was fighting the Golden Dragon. As for the 9 Hell Demon Crocodile, he didn't notice it. But judging from the momentum of the 2 primordial supremes' consciousnesses descending at the same time, the 9 Hell Demon Crocodile was clearly not weaker than the Scarlet Unicorn. In other words, these 2 terrifying existences were evenly matched with the Golden Dragon. Even if it was just a consciousnesses descending from their seriously injured bodies, it was enough to frighten people. They could definitely destroy the entire star domain with just a thought. Just as Yi Xian was trembling, a powerful consciousnesses so terrifying that they almost made his mind collapse swept over his body. Fortunately, at this moment, the corpse lantern tattoo on his chest burned slightly, so this consciousnesses didn't see anything and just swept over him. At this moment, Yi Xian realized how naive he was. If it wasn't for the headless infant corpse watching over him and helping him cover up at the crucial moment, he would have been pulled out just now. The so-called perfect vibration of the secret spiritual technique might be more powerful in the future when Yi Xian became stronger, but with his current cultivation, it was simply a joke to try to deceive the consciousnesses of the primordial supremes. Roar! Screech! Just as Yi Xian was secretly rejoicing, the crimson unicorn and the 9 hell demon crocodile roared again. They had just searched the core hinterland of the root of all evil to no avail and had left the cauldron out of anger. But they did not expect to find nothing in the buffer zone of the central region. That's right. Has that detestable mastermind really left? How could his speed be so fast? The crimson unicorn and the 9 gloom demon crocodile roared, and their energy consciousness went far away. At this time, in the periphery of the root of all evil, 2 similar roars came, but they were clearly far away, and seemed to be rushing towards the vast void of the first universe outside the root of all evil. Yi Xian was startled, and his expression immediately became strange. These 2 fellows were obviously unwilling to give up. After searching the entire source of all evil starfield to no avail, they actually chased out of this starfield. They wanted to go to the vaster void of the first universe to have a look. Perhaps the mastermind behind the escape was in a nearby starfield. Who knew? At this thought, Yi Xian immediately prayed in his heart. At this time, he really hoped that a large fleet of the Tianji race would just happen to pass by outside the root of all evil. If that was really the case, when these 2 guys saw that there were no clues in the void of the first universe, and their last hope was destroyed, they would definitely vent their anger on the spot and directly destroy that fleet. In this way, when they returned, the probability of destroying this group of black beetles in the buffer zone, which were even less than ants, would basically be reduced to less than half. Of course, this kind of thing was generally not very likely. How could there be such a coincidence? Wanting a fleet, and one would come immediately? But in reality, things in this world were just so coincidental. Perhaps it was all fated.